least one question. Thank you. Yes, you all have the opportunity to ask at least one question. Each panel member will ask a question from the question bank that has already been shared. And please ask a question from a different section that was previously asked. So let me just be sure, does everyone have access to the question bank? It's the same one from Tuesday's meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Also, please try to be consistent with the questions that you ask. Any panelist can ask a follow-up question if you would like the candidate to elaborate on their answer. Do be reminded that the interviews are limited to 30 minutes, so we will be keeping time. I in particular will kind of be a timekeeper and tell you when we're down to our final 10 minutes. At that time, if we are down to our final 10 minutes and we have not gotten through the full 2 rounds of asking the questions, we will reserve the final question for our student leadership who's represented on the group. I believe on Tuesday that was Leah. I'm not sure if I see Leah again on the chat today. Has someone else come from that organization? The student organization?
Yes.
Okay, Christiana, that's you?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, yes. So if in the event that we have not finished the final round of questions, to keep us on to time, we will leave the final question to Christiana. And then at that point, we will now open the floor for the candidate to ask their questions back to us or ask us to elaborate on any information about the School Board of Commissioners. Is everyone clear on that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question / suggestion? I'm sorry, I keep trying.
No, please, go for it.
Is it possible that after the first round, if there's still time left, we don't necessarily go through and everybody asks again? Could we just ask if anybody has further questions? And if people do, they get to ask? Like, I don't know. I just want to be sure. Sometimes I didn't have a second question, and I think other people may have, and it didn't get to them in the second round. So maybe we don't go through in order. We just open it up. Would that work for people?
Yeah, I think that's what Janelle was actually saying. That.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. No, Roger. So that's what I think she was doing this time, to say that if it's like only 10 minutes left, she was going to make sure that the student is able to ask their second question. And then if there's anyone that has like a burning question that they can ask, but if not, then we'll just allow like the candidate, if there's any closing remarks they have, and then if not, we just move on to the next one. Yep.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I apologize.
I'm sorry. That's
no, but actually that was a good expansion on the question, right? Because even after we go through the first round, if there's still time for a full second round, but you don't actually have a second question, then you can go ahead and say, I'm not sure how you would formally like to say it, but just say that no additional questions for me, and we can skip to the next person. So yes, that's fine if you want to go that route as well.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yep.
With that, yes. Okay.
Yep.
That sounds wonderful. Okay, so you have our agreement. And lastly,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but before the first candidate, will we have the opportunity for each one on the call today to introduce ourselves and our organizations? Because it looks like there's some different people on the call today.
Yes. So I was actually just about to get to the roll call.
Okay, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm like you, Roger. I'm not going to say anything else.
That is fine. All right. Roll call is next. Before we start the interviews, I do see that we have a couple new people, so we can get started. I'm going to just name the organization. And if you are here representing that organization, please say your name so to make sure that we have you listed. And during the interviews, I will introduce all of you to kind of keep us moving a bit more quickly. So starting with American Civil Liberties Union. Okay, that was Frank, so no substitute for him today. Okay. American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Okay. Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City.
Yes, my name is Christiana Diggs, and Cameron Askew is also going to be joining us halfway as Brooks' designee.
Okay, Cameron Askew. Okay, thank you, Christiana. Baltimore City Council of Education, Workforce, and Youth Committee. Okay, Baltimore City Public School Administrators and Supervisors Association. Baltimore Family Alliance.
Brianna Kaufman.
Brianna Kaufman, all right, thank you. Baltimore Teachers Union.
Hi, I'm here, Diamond Tay Brown.
Diamond Tay Brown, okay. Disability Rights Maryland.
Tasha Marshall.
Tasha Marshall, okay. Fund for Educational Excellence.
Roger Schulman.
Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools.
Mackenzie Allen.
Parent and Community Advisory Board.
Jason Green.
Wonderful. PTA Council of Baltimore City.
Charles Smith.
Thank you. And Mayor's Office.
Dr. Brooks.
Okay, excellent.
And it looks like we also have CCAC on here. I see Ms. Billups. Special Education Citizens Advisory Council is on here as well.
Let me be sure to add you to the list. One moment, please. Okay, and say that one more time, please.
Sheila
Or
Billups.
Miss Billups. Okay,
Yeah.
Miss Sheila Billups. Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, and so just a final run through of and Ms. Phillips, do you have access to the question bank?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And just
Yes.
a quick run through, okay, wonderful. Quick run through of the candidates that we are seeing today. Emily Ames Messenger, Ashaya Parker, Melanie Hood Wilson, Mark Procopio, Larry Simmons, Devin Sutherland, Wynisha Witt, and Shauna McMillan.
All right, I served on the board with Larry Simmons with PCABs, so I won't be voting with him.
Okay, so you'll recuse from that one.
I submitted my information. I recused myself from Larry as well because he's my board vice chair. So.
Thank you so much. Any other notice? Okay, we are fine.
Sorry, I submitted it before, but Melanie Hood Wilson is on the board of my organization, so I'll recuse myself from her vote.
Okay. Now, again, you are able to ask a question. If you would prefer not to, that is also fine, but you are able to ask a question. You just can't vote for them.
So yeah, so the same, I'm going to ask the questions, but in my prior life, I awarded a grant award to Melanie. So I'll be recusing myself at the time of the voting, but I will be asking questions.
Okay. Okay, we are in our final 7 minutes. Now, do you all want to do the same? I'm opening up the questions now. Same order that we did the round robin style on Tuesday?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I am as well. I think what you can do though is you can put Ms. Billups before me and I just go last.
Okay.
This is Dr. Brooks.
To do that. Okay, we have our candidate is now, Jeanette, please confirm our candidate is now online.
Yes, Emily is in the waiting room. I have not admitted her in yet, though.
Can we wait until 4:30, please?
Yes, we will be waiting the full time.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it is now 4:30. Jeanette, can you let in our first candidate?
Yes, letting her in now.
Okay, I believe I saw. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
Hi, Emily. Hi, very nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank
My,
you for having me.
my name is Janelle Penny, and I am the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. On with us tonight to conduct your interview is Christiana Diggs from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union. We also have Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from Parent and Community Advisory Board, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, Sheila Billups from Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I would like to remind you that today's meeting is going to be recorded and is open for the public and will be posted publicly. We will do round robin style on the interview. Please make sure that you keep your responses succinct and yet thorough. And with that, I will turn it over to begin.
All right, let's go.
So Christiana, please get us started.
Hello, Miss Emily.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
So my first question would be, what unique skill or characteristic would you bring to the current school board?
All right. I think it's less of a, well, so I think kind of the thing that I bring is that I have spent the last 15 years in about most of the roles that there are in city schools. I started as a teacher. I have been a community school coordinator on the Near East Side. I'm now a social worker and a parent. I've also, am a resident. I've employed Baltimore City student resident or graduates, and kind of moving throughout all of those spaces have just gotten to interact with people throughout Baltimore City, with educators, with school leaders, with students, and have gotten to kind of hear their stories and things that they care about, and see things that have worked well in the district over the last 15 years and things that we've had to kind of navigate and figure out as we go, and have gotten to really learn and listen to some great people within the district, and learn from their expertise, and kind of with that get a vision of our students really deserve excellent education. And so how do we take that and create a path forward? And I think within the school board, being able to take those relationships and contexts that I've built over the last 15 years and tying that with an ability just to build relationships and consensus with really diverse experiences, and how do you build partnerships where there is conflict, and to move forward so that our kids and our parents get the schools that they deserve.
Thank you.
I think I'm next. Hi, this is Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
So interacts, what was the second? Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Sure. How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
All right. So I think we are really blessed that we have a gifted CEO that has been in education. And when you're looking at district office and the CEO and the chiefs that are underneath her, they are coming with many years of gifted experience and to be able to navigate the school system. And so ultimately, it is the goal of the board to provide policy and oversight and coaching, and to partner within those departments to help the CEO build relationships with outside partners, to build relationships with families, and to advise on those policy roles. And so that ultimately that should be a collaborative relationship built on trust, and that the board is seen as a resource to be able to go through and build strong relationships where that is not necessarily something that the district can approach directly, and that that's a collaborative effort. So, you know, if that's partnering with many of our universities and strong institutional partners within Baltimore, of which we have many, whether that's the unions, that the goal is that the board is helped to be there to help support in building those strong relationships. In terms of boots on the ground, you know, the CEO's role is that he or she is managing her staff, whether that's teachers in schools and district office staff, but that ultimately they're being held accountable to the policies that the board is helping to inform and draft. So ideally, that is a collaborative relationship. You know, ultimately, the CEO does answer to the board. And like in any supervisory role, you know, like feedback should be frequent and honest and specific and detailed. But ultimately with the goal that you're making the CEO in this case the most successful version of that role. And so that you're helping to collaborate so that ultimately everyone is moving forward with clear communication and trust towards a common goal of having strong outcomes, academic as well as kind of wraparound services in a whole child, so that our students have what they need to be most successful.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily. My name is Diamond Tay Brown.
Hello.
And my question is, part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions.
Yeah.
Would you know about the current issues and or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
Absolutely. I think Baltimore is not unique in that we are being asked to do more with less in this age in education, especially as like federal spending is coming down after post-COVID recovery dollars. So, you know, money and how are we compensating our teachers who have impossibly difficult jobs fairly, that there is trust in those systems, that we have operations that move smoothly to make sure that teachers are paid effectively and accurately and quickly. I think that we offer compensation that's competitive with surrounding districts. I think also just working conditions, when you think about school discipline and when you look at kind of behavioral, and that students and staff have the supports that they need to create learning environments that are healthy and effective, are all huge district or issues that we're dealing with right now in the district. And I think part of the school board is we are lucky that we have amazing institutions in Baltimore and that we have partners to be able to work with that. But a huge part is that we can't do this without teachers, and we can't do this without principals who are on the front line and really doing this work every day. So we looking at how are we making sure that systems and our contract is supporting the people who are on the front line. Not just financially, but also with those things that are sometimes more nuanced, that you're like teachers, we're listening to what they're asking for and giving teachers and administrators what they need and support. So whether that's, you know, ways to have whole life balance in school and give people a breath and a break, or whether that's compensation for work that's done over the summer and everything in between.
Tasha, next question.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities in the state of Maryland?
It is such an important thing.
Baltimore City and the state of Maryland. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, first of all, like I started teaching high school in the district when I was 21 years old and knew nothing, and got a crash course in special education. And I can tell you certainly that one class in graduate school is not enough to make that happen. And kind of through there, I've learned as I've gone through. And a lot of that has been listening to families. As a community school coordinator, we spent a ton of time helping families navigate the system and figuring out how do we get that. And that's persistence and documentation and really working and partnering with teachers and brainstorming and being creative. So that's kind of the lived experience part, and kind of beginning to navigate some of that with my daughter who's in kindergarten and figuring out how do we get the supports that you need when you don't necessarily know what those are. I think kind of on a more macro level and a policy level, I've been blessed for the last probably 5 or 6 years and last year to chair the Coalition to Reform School Discipline, which is packed full of some really amazing advocates for educators and specifically for individuals with disability, and got to sit on the Seclusion and Restraint Committee with MSDE this past year. So have gotten some chance to kind of think through what those nitty-gritties of policy implications are, and how do you balance what students need, but also how do you work that into the context that kids are not being educated alone, that there's an educator in that room and you don't always know kind of what they're bringing to the table, and that there are other kids. So how do you create school environments that are both supporting the rights of individual kids? How are you using parents as advocates and partners in that process because they know their kid better than anybody? How do you work with teachers who really are learning those kids and giving them the strategies and the support that they need, whether that's from inside the school, whether that's from partners, which again, Baltimore City, we have a ton of those, many which we use well, some that we could use better. And then ultimately at the policy level, like how are we making sure that the district as a whole has the resources that they need to make strong policy, but then also the ability to really follow through. And a lot of that involves just a lot of listening from stakeholders. And I think also then the research to really delve deep into those policy experts that know how do we make sure that we are giving a fair, just, and equitable and legal education to all students.
Thank you.
Emily, thanks for being here. I'm Roger Schulman with the Fund for Education Excellence. The school system has a budget of somewhere between about 1.6 and 1.7 billion dollars. And part of the role of the school board is to approve the budget and to oversee the financial management or oversight over the how money is being spent. Obviously, I have no expectation that you've managed a budget of $1.7 billion, but can you share any experiences you have had working with budgets, overseeing budgets, what your role was, and sort of some sort of sense of the scale of the budget and how you approach it?
Yeah. So in my previous role, I did a lot of grants oversight, both application, reporting, both with private funders as well as state and then federal grants. I was within University of Maryland. So I think for context, you're like any big bureaucracy, there are things that work well, and there are a lot of things that are really, truly infuriating. You're like, this should be a simple solution. And quite frankly, it's not. You're like, the check came in, where is it? And nobody knows. So I think for that, the Positive School Center, when I left, was about $6 or $7 million. So considerably smaller, but when you're looking at a departmental level and kind of the variables that think of like what's happening when you're talking about procurement, what's happening when you're talking about purchasing, how are you doing, when you're submitting requests for proposals and fielding board approved vendors. A lot of those processes are things that I'm pretty familiar with from learning the hard and painful way. Trying to figure out kind of how, when it comes to ultimately kind of going back to, President Brown's question around unions, you're like, ultimately, a lot of that still comes back down to trust and then just solid operations and systems. And when something's not working, really working with the people, at Maryland, we are blessed to have an amazing accounting team that would spend hours on the phone really going through the process of like, why is this not adding up the way that it should be? And how do we work through that process? So obviously at a different scale, I have a lot of experience with operations at the school and kind of semi-departmental level. But, ultimately a lot of the same principles I imagine apply for better or for worse.
Mackenzie?
What role do you thankful for the accountants in the world who choose to make that their calling in life? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
That's fine. What role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
That's a really good question. I think charter schools and also just school choice of when you look at Baltimore City, and particularly as we're coming out of pre-K and K enrollment, how we think about enrollment and school choice in Baltimore, which realistically is losing students, is a really, really important part to think about. How do we ensure that all kids have high quality education, but that's also not compromising when it comes to equitable outcomes, and that it's not a way that is skimming off more privileged students, whether that's economics, whether that's parental involvement, whether that is just academics giftedness. Like, how do we kind of create a system that is serving all students, but also creating a compelling portfolio for the city that is attracting students and helping parents and families choosing to stay in Baltimore. So I think charters are a really important part of that. With my work with the PSC, and then even now in kind of contracting work that I've been doing with Maryland, have been blessed to do a lot of work with some of our larger charter networks in Baltimore City. I think a lot of the time they do offer a really exciting level of kind of mid-level supervision and coaching coming into schools. That is an interesting model that I think the district is doing a lot to apply when they talk to, like ILEDs and how they're working with the district cohorts, but the charters are certainly a part of that. And I think are opportunities that we can learn to see what works well and how do we grow on our strengths and learn quickly from our things that are less successful. So yeah, they're definitely, I think they're a part of a reality of the system, and just the challenge is how do we make sure that that remains an equitable part for all students, and that we're not ultimately harming, that students aren't, that's lower performing schools or lower income schools or otherwise, for whatever reason, have been deemed less desirable schools aren't being drained of resources, is kind of the balancing act for that the district has to take into account.
How you doing?
Hey.
Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision making at the district level.
I mean, ultimately, they are the biggest decision maker we have in the district. Whether we acknowledge that role or not, they're the ones that choose to send their kids to school every day. Whether, that reflects things like safety, that reflects things like quality of education, whether that's, are they feeling engaged and safe and valued where they are? And kind of to get to that big macro, like how we make decisions in the district should reflect that. Are we, and some of that I think the district has made post-COVID, and even like as a state, they've shifted how they've done family engagement surveys. Has shifted. You're like, Baltimore City has really stepped up in that they are collecting data and looking to pull. And when you talk about things like enrollment, like they're starting to think like, how do we ask families what the decisions are that they're making and why they're making them? I think there's always more that we can do that. And there's a balance that we're also respecting teachers and principals and district office staff as the experts who have been trained in what they're doing, and especially when it comes to like instruction, that they bring an expertise to the table. But I think, how do you balance that with ultimately students and families are the experts in their own life experience, and that we need to ask and we need to listen to that. And the reality of where we are both in a district and as a nation now, when it comes to things like safety, when it comes to career path, when you think about kind of what are those AIB like 5 pillars, when we're looking about kind of changes in funding models, like a lot of those answers come down to family engagement. Are kids being put into early childhood programs? Are they being prepared for the career paths that they want to go? Are they being accepted into high schools that are preparing them for the life that they envision for themselves? And ultimately, the only way that we're going to do that is to ask, and then not only ask, but really stay and listen carefully, and then build that into the systems that we have within district. And I think the role of the board is tricky there. And I think it was Kalila in the last board meeting as they were saying goodbye to the junior commissioner, the student commissioner. I think having a student commissioner on the board is so important, but they had really commented that he had spent more time than any other, like just the amount of time that he had spent in schools. And I think when you come to the board, people want to tell you about their lives and what's going well and what's not, and whether that's a parent or whether that's a student or whether that's a teacher or a principal. The board, I think, could offer a place of like, how do you support the district in getting to that place in a way that is supportive and affirming to the district's role, but also making sure that we really are listening to Baltimore residents, whatever their role is, and that we have strong schools coming out the other side of that.
Thank you. Oftentimes, well, not all times, but times, where the school board wants to go and the administration may not be in sync with what a community and the parents may want to go. How would you reconcile that?
I think I will share a story if that's okay. So when I was the community school coordinator at James McHenry, we were zero-based by a state mandate. And so almost our principal, almost all of our school staff, I was one of very few people that stayed. And parents were really upset and the neighborhood was irate. And ultimately, I think coming down to that is Dr. Santelises and the district and the state like made the right call. Students were not being well served by the education that was happening in that building. That being said, when it looks at how the relationship of how that rolled out and how the communication of how that rolled out is that ultimately things were missed and that the community lost trust in the school and that ultimately took a lot to rebuild for that new administration coming in. And I think when you look at that, the reality is like, of course, people are experts in their own story, but you don't know what you don't know. And so how are you, and a lot of that, I think that comes back again to listening and both looking to the experts, but then also realizing that expertise comes in a lot of different ways and a lot of different places. And so how do you look to not build a compromise, but how do you look to build consensus in the fact that what everybody wants is for students to have a strong education? And so how do we work together, however kind of rough that road is, to find a place that ultimately is going to make sure that we have schools that are academically and financially viable and thriving. So I know that's kind of a roundabout story. And I think like a lot of what that did is like for us at James McHenry, that was like boots on the ground, like door to door, family meetings, but also just like going and meeting one-to-one with people. And then I think that's also just showing up and building trust over time. And so with the school board, you know, ultimately their role is limited, but part of that is in policies and making sure that we are listening to all the stakeholders, that there is transparency in that process and that it's clear kind of the reason behind the decision making, providing time for people that are not in agreement, and then kind of working to find a path forward to re-engage them as partners in that process.
Thank you.
All right, so before the next question, Ms. Phillips, we just doing a time check. We have 7 minutes left. We have 2 more formal questions, and then you all get a chance to ask a question.
Okay,
so Ms. Phillips, please.
Can you hear me?
I can, thanks.
Oh, great. All right. My question is, what role do you think systemic racism has played in the schools, in the school system in Baltimore, and how should the district leaders address its legacy?
Yeah. In a city, I would arguably nationally, that's pretty undeniable, but in a city like Baltimore, there is really no way that you can get around that. When you look at fundamentally, schools were built in a redline system, and that, you know, that really has continued. And when you look at systemic disinvestment, whether that's in school buildings, whether that's in teachers, whether that's in the size of the school, whether that's in where community partners are. You can't throw a stone in Baltimore and not hit a university or institution, but we have many schools that are, geographically really isolated from those community anchors. And so I got lost in the yes and the amen. Ms. Phillips, would you mind repeating the second part of the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, ma'am.
Okay. I'm in another part of the building, so I just want to make sure.
No, it was me, not you. You're fine.
Okay. Can somebody help me with that question?
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I can take a
So
stab.
the second part was, so the whole question, what role do you think systemic racism has played in the school system in Baltimore, and how should district leaders address its legacy?
Would be the important part of the question. And I think a lot of that kind of actually ties into the charter question. And, school closures aren't on the table now, but, when we look at scant resources, that's not unforeseen that they're not going to come back at some point. And I think, how do you make sure that you have schools that, having worked in a school that, doesn't have an AP and there's not enough coverage for lunch and teachers are stretched past the point of thin, that is not an equitable outcome. And at the same time, taking away the last institution in many of these neighborhoods, that is not an equitable outcome either. And so part of that is, and I think, Dr. Tinsley, when you look at the 21st century school movement and just really creative problem-solving mechanisms to invest in schools and invest in communities and to listen to what communities are asking for, is a really good step along that way. And I think kind of what that next step is to continue to be creative. And, Maryland statewide is really investing hard in community schools and is investing hard in college and career pathways and is investing hard in early childhood education. And all of those, when you look at a research point, when you look at a common sense point, when you look at asking neighborhoods and communities what they're looking for, those are effective strategies. And the state has invested in that, and city schools is investing in that. And I think a lot of that, when you look at systemic relationship, is how do we build, not just pouring in resources willy-nilly, but really looking and asking people what they need and then investing resources, whether that's buildings, whether that's people, whether that's finding partners who are going to donate, and whether that is people, money, manpower, whatever that is, how do we invest to make those visions happen for communities? And just the district is also then doing the balancing act of how do we do that in a way that is driving academic outcomes? Because the reality is, reading and math, our students deserve not just holistic school environments, but ones that are high performing as well.
Thank you. And I have the last question. This is Dr. Brooks.
Hi, Dr. Brooks.
Hi, how are you? So I heard you talk about being a teacher and a school community coordinator. So what was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision, as succinctly as you can.
Amen. As I'm at time. This is a silly one, but I think just as a social worker, I also live in Baltimore City and live with a lot of neighborhood contact. And you're whenever you're going to kind of do CPS referrals are always just ones that just eat at your soul. And that is how do you make those really complex moral and ethical decisions are really hard, and 15 years later don't get any easier. So I think without going into detail, but you're how do you make sure that kids have what they need to be the most successful? And a lot of the time you're making those decisions without all the information. But we're also ethically mandated to do the best that you can. So that's a very simple, very direct service thing, but I think that's the one that's going to get you every time. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we are in the final minute, but Emily, if you have a question for the panel, please ask.
You guys have done a wonderful job, so I don't think I have anything specific in this like final minute. This is fitting, these new commissioners are fitting into an existing board. And so from the outside and as community partners looking in, if they're less in the skills and more in kind of like those dynamics and roles that fit in, are there things that you're kind of see as needs that would make the school board more effective in its current role? If anybody had ideas for just things that they've seen as needs. I realize that's also kind of a loaded question, but what are people excited about, I guess, about the board as well?
We are going to direct that question over to our student leader, Christiana, if you want to answer, and then we will wrap up.
Could you say it again? Sorry.
What do you want to see in a board? What are you looking for in a board member?
I would say personally for me, since I am a student that goes to Baltimore City Schools and I'm a part of an organization that focuses on student advocacy, I would want to see a commissioner that takes that into account. See more things for students in Baltimore, children in general, like all around. Just, yeah that.
Amen. Thank you. And thank you for serving. What a cool way to advocate. I would say you can't get any better for that. Way to show up. It's a hard skill. Way to go. Good luck. What year are you? I'm sorry, I don't have any questions. I'm at time, but good luck. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. We'll be reaching out again soon.
All right. Be well, everyone, and thanks for your service.
Thank you. All right. We are moving into our next person. I'm going to also, I just put on the chat the order of the round robin. Jeanette, can you let in our next candidate?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hi, Ashaya.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Janelle Penny, and I'm the Chief of Staff of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. For today's interview, you'll be interviewing with the panel, and I will give you the names, sorry, in 1 minute. The panel is led by Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Christiana Diggs, Brianna Kaufman of the Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund of Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from the Parent and Community Advisory Board, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, Sheila Bishops from Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I would just like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded and is open to the public. And with that, I will turn it over to Christiana to give us our first question.
Hello, Miss Parker. How are you?
I'm well.
That's good. My first question would be, what unique skill or characteristic would you bring to this current school board?
All right. So good evening, everyone. Just to know how to pronounce my name is Ashia. I am a current parent, a Baltimore City School student, and I am a past parent. My daughter graduated from Baltimore Talent Development years back. She would be mad if I told you that, but at least 10 years ago. And she went on to be a college graduate. So I'm excited about that. My unique skills, I am a community, I work in the community, so I consider myself a community organizer. Again, I am a parent. my educational background, I have a Master of Public Administration. So I understand how budgets work. I understand bureaucracy. I understand policy and how systems work. Also, from my previous employment background, I worked for the state government for 20 years. So I also, again, understand how system works. And I will be looking forward to bringing some of those perspectives to the board.
Hi, this is Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance. My question is, share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board. How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Yes, so I see the role as of the CEO as the person who is ultimately in charge of the day-to-day operations of the organization or of the school system. And as the school board, their role is a governing body that oversees those operations and how sets policy for how those things are carried out. I feel like their relationship should be one of transparency, one of partnership, and one of accountability.
Hi, Ashia. My name is Diamond Tay Brown. And my question is, part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
So I don't know a lot. I know about unions in general and how they negotiate. Like I said, I was a state employee and part of the union. So I know that our teachers need to be paid. They need contracts that ensure that benefits, retirement, that they are taken care of because they take care of our children. I also understand that Baltimore City Schools has a budget, and we want to make sure that our budget and the needs of the school system are met. So it's marrying those things and negotiating to make sure that we can have the best for both parties. As far as you asked about the climate, I'm not sure. The only thing I will tell you, because of course I'm currently not on the school board, you might hear like things in the news or things in the community. I'm not one to really go on hearsay. I can just tell you about like my experiences. So I'm not totally sure. I just know that there's a negotiation that needs to be had, and sometimes those negotiations can be tough.
Good evening. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities?
I would say um I'm pretty knowledgeable about it. My son is a special needs student who attends Augusta Fells. He's in the 11th grade. So my knowledge goes as far as what has been explained to me as a parent of a student, and the rights that have been told to me. But I'm very aware that students with disabilities need accommodations, and that the school system and school board should be working to make sure that those accommodations and rights are met.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Roger Schulman. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
The school system has a budget of somewhere between 1.6 and 1.7 billion dollars. Part of the board's job and responsibility is to approve the budget and to oversee those expenditures over the course of a year and monitor and understand how those dollars are being spent and being sure that it's in accordance with the approved budget. I obviously have no expectation that you've managed a $1.7 billion budget before, but can you share a little bit about your experience with budgets, how you've approached them, what your role has been, and sort of the size and scale of the budgets you've been involved with?
Yes, so I am a executive director of a community-based organization. We have a little under a $2 million budget. That pales in comparison to almost $2 billion budget. However, I work with my team to put a budget together. I work with the board to pass that budget, and it's my direct job to implement and make sure that funds are both coming in and being expended properly.
Hi, my question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
So charter schools play a important role in the portfolio. I say as a parent, because it gives students the opportunities to explore maybe special talents, special gifts, and maybe give students and parents the opportunity to explore things that are outside of a traditional neighborhood school. I also understand the importance of making sure that our neighborhood schools are fully attended and have fruitful programming and offerings for those students as well.
Thank you, Ashaya. My question is, please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision making at the district level.
I'm sorry, Jason, you're a little low. The role of the family and community, tell me the last piece.
Should play in the decision making at the district level.
Oh, yes. I definitely feel like the community in general should play a role in decision making. I think it looks different depending on what the issue is or what we're trying to accomplish. So I definitely think that at the district level, we should engage parents, students, and community members as much as possible and appropriate for issues or feedback. So that could just look like sending out newsletters, just good old-fashioned door knocking. It could look like sending information through PTOs and student family councils, those kind of things. But I do think there's a role for the greater residents of Baltimore to be involved in some, not involved in decision making, but at least be more aware of what is happening at the district level.
Good afternoon, still in the afternoon. There are times when the school board and the administration may not see eye to eye with the community associations and the parents, determining where they're trying to take the schools. How would you as a board member deal with that?
As far as transparency or just how
would you try to bring them together?
Oh, how to bring it together. So I think the best thing where parties are not on the same side, especially when we know that we have the internal workings and data to know why the decision is being made, is to bring the community along and give the transparency and give the reasons why, and then also give hope around some of those decisions as much as possible. So I'm not afraid of tough decisions. It's just my leadership style to make sure everyone truly understands why and what that decision is.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Phillips?
Okay. All right. Okay, my question is share an experience where you have had to provide financial oversight for an organization or a project and managing a complex budget.
Yes. As I answered Mr. Schulman's question earlier, I am an executive director and I am in charge of the budget. It's a $2 million budget for a organization that only serves seven communities in one zip code. So it can be complex. So just making sure that fundraising is done, which I'm pretty sure we don't do that in this level, but making sure that fundraising is done, making sure that accounting is correct, making sure that expenditures are met and not overspent, and then also making sure that reasonable, thoughtful, and responsible things are done when there happens to be a surplus.
Thank you.
I was going to say I've had that responsibility for the last 6 years.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Ms. Parker. How are you?
I'm well, yourself?
I'm well, thank you. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
The hardest decision that we had to make impacting youth, I would say probably on a community level, some years, let's say 7 or 8 years ago, the youth that I represent at that time at the board level wanted to advocate to make sure that money was returned to the Baltimore City budget through City Council. And they wanted to advocate directly to the mayor, City Council people, and alike. And I think as an adult, sometimes you're like, oh no, you cannot confront the mayor, that kind of thing. But I gave the students the leadership tools. We talked about how to engage in a respectful way. And along with other students and other community organizations throughout the city, they did advocate, they did push, they did have a direct conversation with the then mayor, and the money did get returned back, $2-some million to the budget. So even today, we have year-long youth works. That was some of the push that was done back in 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have done really great with timing. So I will take us back to the start. And if you have an additional question, I will kind of run through the roll call again. And if you have an additional question that you would like to ask Ms. Parker, please feel free. If not, just say no. We'll move to the next person. So starting back with Christiana.
Yes, I had an additional question.
Yes.
How would you support youth advocacy efforts?
Oh my gosh, youth advocacy, again, like I said, that's at my heart. So I'm there. However, however that needs to be, if that's mentorship, if that's helping with any planning, if that's doing any professional development, if that's looping youth groups and students together, I'm definitely down for youth mentorship and advocacy. A matter of fact, our youth group had a what we call the Issues Assembly this May, and we partnered with Baltimore City Schools, and we had, I believe, 4 or 5 schools come and declared a field trip. So the students were able to advocate and have a quote unquote conference during their school day as an excused absence.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Brianna Kaufman.
No additional questions.
Okay, thank you. President Brown.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to Charles's question. Ashia, the question that Charles asked about about the community and the school board being at odds and how you would deal with it. a lot of candidates have been asked that question, and what I hear as a theme is that if the board and community are at odds, people are comfortable with making a decision that may be at odds with the community, as long as they are able to explain the decision, have the data to back it up, and we're transparent with the community. My question is, what if the at odds is with the other board members because you agree with the community? What are your thoughts on that? And if you're comfortable with making tough decisions, are you also comfortable with making those type of tough decisions?
I am. So I don't believe people should buy something they don't know what they're buying. So I am a very responsible, level-headed person who makes fair decisions. But if the decision that is moving forward is not fair to the community or does not sit with my value system, I am not afraid to vote no. So yes, I'm not a contentious person, but I do advocate for what I believe to be right. So if it's being at odds with other school board members, I always try to find a way that we can mend that and come to a consensus. But I am not afraid to vote no or be on a opposing side if it is for the greater good of parents and students.
Thank you. That's all I have, Janelle.
Thank you. On to Ms. Marshall.
Sure. So my previous question was related to your familiarity with students with disabilities, the legal rights of students with disabilities. And my question is, has there ever been a time where you've had to respond to the needs of a student or person with a disability?
I will say yes. Again, my son is a person with a disability, and I've had to respond through transportation not being up to par. I've had to respond through the IEP process where I felt like maybe he needed a little more through his curriculum. I had to respond when I didn't feel like he was being placed in the correct school for his level and his ability. So I am familiar with. All parents get the book with the laws and the rules in it. That's my familiarity. Like, I'm not a legal expert or have done
A
any
more lived experience.
Yeah.
More lived experience. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I want to reserve the final 5 minutes for you to ask questions, Ms. Parker. So for our remaining panelists, do you have one question to ask?
Just one.
Yeah. Well, let me ask the panel.
Can I use the 5 minutes?
One additional? Yes, I want you to have your full 5 minutes.
Thank
so
you.
To our remaining panelists, any one last question, or are we good to turn it over to Ms. Parker for her question?
I would like to ask one question, if I may. What role do you think systemic racism has played in the school system in Baltimore, and how should district leaders address its legacy?
Wow, so that's an interesting question in a city that's majority Black, right? So I think systemic racism, it rears its ugly head in many different ways, even through the people who are traditionally oppressed. So I think that it can show up as classism, because we are serving children who are in poverty. We are serving children who parents cannot read and write in some instances. I think just over time, scores and other barriers to students getting resources has all shown its head in Baltimore City schools.
Thank you.
Well, in society in general, but yes, we're fighting systems in general. Yes.
Thank you.
This is Sheila Phillips. Can I ask one additional question?
Yes.
My question would be, tell us why you believe you would be a good school commissioner. Please include your answer. If there is a particular issue that motivates you, tell us that as well, that you would serve.
Okay, I think I would be a good commissioner, number one, because I'm a committed person. I have served on a number of commissions in the city and state to the fullest of my ability. I know as of now, this is a volunteer position. And in those positions, I have served to my highest quality. Also, being a parent, I would like to actually, like I said, I have one 28-year-old and one 11th grader. So I would want to actually see the inner workings and maybe right some wrongs that I saw during their matriculation for generations who are coming through now. As far as a issue, I don't know that I have an issue. I think that my issue would just to make sure that our students are equipped for the future after grade 12. And that doesn't have to be college, just life and work in general, and making sure that everyone from the student, the janitor, the teacher, the principal, the CEO is having a fruitful experience with Baltimore City Schools and carrying out the missions and the goals as planned.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, I'm gonna use my 4 minutes if possible.
Yes, please.
It's a lot of you all, and I don't even know if you know the answer, but what are some things that maybe you are looking for or the board is looking for? What type of skills or what type of person is needed as a replacement?
Ashia, I would say some of the things that I'm looking for is a board member that will ask questions about processes and systems, how the board works, the mechanics of the board, what's working well, what's not working well, what is the processes for the board to receive information and offer information, just really digging into how the school board works and not just going in and accepting past practice without any inquisition.
Yes, thank you. And then the other one is just a process question. What's the process from here?
Okay, thank you. I can answer that one. So we are interviewing our final 8 candidates today. Tomorrow, the group will convene again to kind of deliberate on their different assessments of all the candidates. The portion where the final selection is made, the recommendation is going to the mayor. That will be posted publicly for all candidates to see how the process went and to see who is selected to go forward to the mayor. Those selections will go on, I believe, on Monday. Will be sent up to the mayor. He will then conduct his own interviews, and the finalists will be selected and sworn in by the end of the month.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. I'm 2 minutes early. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Be safe.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I think I saw
I
something.
I just wanted to hop on and say that Miss Melanie Hood Wilson is not in the waiting room yet. I did just email her to let her know to join when she is available.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Jason Green, I see your question. Yes, we will be editing this video and then sharing it tomorrow morning and also be posted tomorrow as well. So editing the recording. And that'll be shared tomorrow.
I'm letting in Melanie now. She's in the waiting room.
Hi, Miss Melanie Hood Wilson. Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm so sorry. I had a little trouble unmuting.
No problem at all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Janelle Penny, and I am the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Tonight, we are going to have your interview for the school. You'll be interviewed by the community panel for the position of school board, Board of School Commissioners. On the line, we have, sorry, let me get my list back, Christiana Diggs from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from Parent and Community Advisory Council Board, Charles Smith from PTA Council of Baltimore City, Sheila Billups from Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Before we get started, I would like to remind you that these meetings are being recorded and will be made available to the public. We have a 30-minute time window, so we ask that you keep your answers succinct yet thorough. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Christiana Diggs for the first question.
Good evening. My first question would be, what unique skill or characteristic would you bring to the current school board?
Well, I'm sorry, I just want to put down my iced tea and answer you properly. I am a career educator. I start with that. I grew up in an education family. My mom was a Baltimore City Public School teacher. My aunt was a principal. My uncle was a guidance counselor. When there's only been a 4-year period in my life up until recently that I was not in some way involved with Baltimore City Public Schools, and that's when actually 5-year period, and that's when I went away to college to complete my bachelor's and master's degree. And I knew then that what I wanted was to come back to Baltimore and become an educator. I have not been an educator for Baltimore City Public Schools for these past 30 years as a professional. I taught for Baltimore City for a while, so I do know what the teacher experience is. I then was an administrator at the Community College of Baltimore County for, 19 years. And over that time, I learned a great deal about what it means to lead an education program. My role was very much like that of a school principal. I was in charge of training, hiring, managing teachers, and curriculum, sometimes designing, actually often designing curriculum, managing the budget for the educational program, designing the annual budget each year for an educational program. So I bring experience in several different areas of education. I then was a charter school founder, so I was on the team of founders, I should say, who founded Patterson Park Public Charter School. I'm one of the people who wrote the charter. application for that. So there's some experience that I have in terms of also, the founding, but also the running of a charter school. I was president of the board there for 5 years. 3 of those years, we did not have an executive director. So I pretty much had to play that role in whatever way I could as board president. So following that, I was with PCAB, the Parent and Community Advisory Board to Baltimore City Public Schools. So I got to see a lot of how the wheels turn at the district level. So I'm coming in with some idea of that. I think people often have very pie in the sky ideas of what happens in terms of the school board, what they're capable of, where their powers extend or don't. And because of the time on PCAB, I have a pretty decent idea of what it is that I'm hoping to walk into. Please pardon me. And if you see my fan going, I hope it doesn't distract you. I'm out of state and there's no air conditioning. So going on to skills that I have, I would say that I bring leadership to the table. I bring experience to the table. I'm a person who has studied child development. I'm a person who also knows how to run, manage, or lead an educational organization. So I bring both of those to the table, both the understanding of the needs of children, but also the understanding of how you actually create a program that, or sustain a program that is going to be effective as an educator. I hope that answers the question. I also bring a great deal of empathy and compassion, which is part of all of the work that I do. I now am a business owner. I own a diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company. And a big part of what we do is to try to do our work through empathy and to lead in empathy, and communities learning more about each other and communities learning how to work with each other.
Thank you.
Good evening. The next question is, share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board. How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
The role of the CEO is to take leadership in the running of Baltimore City Public Schools. I'll say her as opposed to him or they, because we do currently have a person who identifies as female as the CEO. So, her job is to develop that vision of what the school year will hold, what the curriculum should be, managing the principals and the staff at North Avenue as well, so that the product, which is a fantastic education for our kids, is what's available and hopefully to every kid in Baltimore City. The role of the board is to govern. The role of the board is to make sure that, first of all, that there's got to be a system of checks and balances. Everyone's accountable to someone. So the board does provide accountability for the CEO. The board also ensures that the decision-making that's happening is, well, first of all, legal and in keeping with, in compliance with the Maryland Code, making sure that whatever decisions are being made are also being done in compliance with the policies of Baltimore City Public Schools, developing policies where they're needed and where they aren't currently there. We know that education, the world is ever changing. Education also is ever changing. And so there's always a need to create new policies or to review policies that exist and either amend or delete those that no longer work in the service of the school system. I can keep going, or are you frozen? Are we frozen? We're not frozen.
Thank you. I was expecting the next person to ask their question, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, sorry, Brianna. I didn't realize we were on the next one. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions. What do you know about the current issues and or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
So I'm going to be quite honest with you in saying that I have been, so as I said, this is the first time I've been out of touch with Baltimore City Public Schools or not involved in quite a while, since my children graduated a couple of years ago. So I've had about a 3-year period of being just an onlooker, reading about you in the Baltimore Banner and about the negotiations that are happening. I'll tell you what I know is that there is a union contract that was developed during my time on PCAB that was definitely out of the ordinary at the time for public school teaching contracts, and was generous. And I'm not going to say overly so, but I do recall there were questions at the time. And this was, again, when I was on PCAB. So we're talking about, when the contract first was being suggested even, or developed. This was during that period. I remember there were a lot of questions about exactly how we would afford it as a school system. But as a former educator, I thought that that instrument and that new model looked like it would be very strong. It was the kind of thing that I thought maybe would attract teachers back to the system, in fact. I have learned recently that the contract is being disputed, and that there are changes that may be made on that front. So that is something that I know. I know that there was a very tense moment this spring in which Dr. Santelises requested a 2.5-year contract and received 1-year contract. I know that it is definitely possible that the board that is being that is being assembled right now, and the 2 people you're appointing to these 2 seats, will likely be a part of whatever transition there may end up being from Dr. Santelises to a new CEO or superintendent. I also know that Baltimore Teachers Union has requested a wide national search for that. Does this put me in the loop?
You are correct. We definitely want the school board to do a transparent public national search.
Yes. And I also know that there were concerns around transparency in the contract negotiations this summer.
Thank you.
Good evening. Please tell me how familiar you are with the legal rights of students with disabilities, and also if there's ever been a time where you've had to respond to the needs of students with disabilities or a person with a disability.
Well, wow, where do I even begin? I should start with the fact, and this is maybe the wrong place to start, but I will start with the fact that my younger daughter is on the spectrum. Although I will say that she is someone whose disability has really not impacted her ability to learn and to be academically successful. And I realize that in the world of disabilities, that really puts her in a very privileged position, and me as her mother. But I just want to get that part out of the way. In 2001, actually, I will say, when I was teaching for Baltimore City Public Schools, I taught several students, many students who had IEPs. And I also taught many students who needed more academically than I was able to provide them in a classroom with 35 kids. And I was often very disheartened by how difficult sometimes it could be to get services for students who very clearly needed services. I left I left Baltimore City Public Schools in 2000. In 2001, I assumed leadership of a program called the Single Step Program at the Community College of Baltimore County. Single Step is a program that is specifically designed for and dedicated to adults who have special needs. Our students were people who were on the autism spectrum, and this was back when the idea of what autism was and how it manifested was something that was very specific and very narrow, because we hadn't seen quite this explosion of folks who are on the spectrum that we've seen recently, and that's because of the change in diagnosis, and I get that. But at the same time, I remember when we first were seeing people at that point called folks with Asperger's coming through college programs, people with autism, and not just through my program, which served people who had a variety of needs. Also, people who were coming into the college as students on the credit side of the house. So I was able to lend some of my and my team's expertise to serving some students on the credit side. Mine was a non-credit program. So going back to my program, it was a non-credit program. We served people, adults, adults, quotes, so over the age of 16, who had a variety of disabilities, but all of those disabilities impacted learning. So some people had what was just generally labeled LD. Some people had disabilities that were intellectual disabilities in nature, developmental disabilities. And my job as the leader of that program was to recruit students, to assess, meet and interview students so that we knew their specific needs, and then to help them to find programming in one of my many programming areas under the umbrella of Single Step that was going to best meet their needs. I believe in customization. I believe in the fact that everybody who has a disability interacts with stimuli and interacts with print and interacts with learning very differently. And I believe that we need to have systems in place that will treat our students as much as individuals in terms of helping them to be more successful in learning, helping them to be more successful socially, helping them to prepare for life. One size fits all does not, actually one size fits all shouldn't exist in education, period, full stop. But in particular, when we're talking about the needs of people with disabilities. One of the things that I started doing over those years, of 19 years of running that program, was developing programming options for students who really didn't fit naturally into any of those that existed and needed more customization. And of course, there's that conundrum that we always have to deal with, that we want to have students with disabilities have opportunities to learn in the ways that they learn best, which means customization as much as possible. But we also know that providing that is incredibly expensive, and that public schools always struggle with finances. And so there have to be strategies there to meet in the middle. And that's something that I believe in quite a bit. How do we create more individualization for our students with disabilities? How do we look at them more as individuals in their learning styles and in terms of their learning needs and their goals? One other thing I'm very proud of that I did in Single Step was I was able to develop a number of workforce development programs that were specifically for people who read or performed math below a certain academic level, typically below a 6th grade level. We had a childcare program for folks who were working on the 90-hour, who needed a specialized approach to earning the 90-hour childcare certificate. Many of the students had learning disabilities. We had a warehouse technician certification program. We had one for folks who want to work with animals. We did a lot of work in partnership with Maryland State Department of Education, because our program was all about ensuring that folks with disabilities were able to have as full lives as possible as adults and continue to learn. Because even though you're 20 or 21, you may still have the capacity to continue to improve even in your academic skills, which is something that is often not believed, I think, in the world of special education, but I've seen it with my own eyes. I think a lot of it's about the setting that the student is in, but I do believe that all students can learn given the right setting. My company now provides, we have a program with a non-public school called the Baltimore Academy, in which we provide workforce development skills and employment training to juniors and seniors at their school. We have a partnership with Autism Society of Maryland, in which we are providing employment coaching for folks who have autism, who are entering the workforce, and whose autism is not significant enough that they can receive DOORS funding or DDA funding. And then we also are doing accessibility consulting, where I have a team of accessibility consultants, each of whom has a specific disability, who come out to different spaces and provide feedback as to whether these spaces are providing what they need as a person who's blind, or a person who's in a wheelchair, or a person who's on the spectrum, or a person who has mental health issues. And that was a very long answer.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm just going to give a quick time check. We have about 10 minutes left and we have another 6 questions. So I'm going to, Roger, pass it on to you, but we are going to have to move very quickly through these final questions.
Yeah, so for the sake of the public record, I've said this before, Melanie's on my board, so I will not be participating in the discussion of her candidacy. And for the sake of time, I think I will forgo my question and let others go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Mackenzie?
Yes. Hi, my question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
I will say, the reason that I entered the charter school movement back in 2004, I want to say, was because of this original theory of charters that comes from, I want to say, Minnesota, that charters could be these autonomous little engines of creativity because you can do things within a charter that maybe you can't do in a traditional school because you don't have all of the same boundaries, I guess, that you'd have in terms of differing in curriculum or instructional approach, et cetera. That's what attracted me to the charter school movement. I think that the place for charters in the school's portfolio is to be that, to be innovators, to create models that are replicable for other schools, for there to be interaction between the charter operators or charter leaders and leaders of traditional schools with exchanges of ideas, what's working and what's not working. And I think it is then for the system to figure out, for the district to figure out how some of those best practices can be taken from the charter setting and implemented in traditional schools. And there's also the other way. There are practices. Having had children at both charter and traditional schools, there are traditional schools that have practices that charters really could learn from and that leaders of charters really could learn from as well. So do I believe that, every school should be a charter school? Absolutely not. No. I believe there's a place for traditional schools and for charter schools.
Thank you. Mr. Green? Oh, sorry, Mr. Green, you're on mute.
Touching the wrong screen. My apologies. So what role do you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level?
I believe in inclusion. And what that means for me and in my work is that anything that affects a community has to have members of that community involved in the process. So if, in the disabilities world, there's this wonderful phrase, nothing about us without us. That's as it should be for all communities. So if we're talking about, we're making decisions for middle schoolers in Baltimore City Public Schools, we absolutely have to have the parents' voice. There has to be transparency so that the parents know what the policy is that's being proposed, why that policy is important and being proposed, and to understand the process also of how those policies get made. When I was with PCAB, one of the things that I wanted most, and I will say did not happen, was that we as PCAB would have opportunities, and I hope maybe it's this way now, I don't know, but that we would have opportunities to read policy proposals in first reader so that we were able to have an opportunity to weigh in before things started to, before the train really left the station, and to be able to solicit feedback from parents before things went to first reader. And that was not something I was able to make happen. I don't know what the process is now, if PCAB is receiving policy ahead of time, if PCAB is not. But I think that PCAB is our key to being able to hear from the parents precisely, what they think of these policies that are going to affect their children and their children's schools. And there has to be that partnership there. If you're not aware of what's going on in PCAB, how can I be aware of what the parent's voice is on that particular issue? Likewise, I'm so happy that there is a student on the Board of School Commissioners. I'm going to be very frank in saying that I think that student commissioners should always have a vote. But it's important that we have representation from our students as well.
And I'm going to waive my questions because Ms. Hood Wilson has already answered it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Charles. Sheila Billups has left the group. So Dr. Brooks, you have the last question.
Thank you. And just for the record, I just want to say that I will not be participating in the vote because I have provided a grant award contract to Ms. Hood Wilson when I was the executive director of special education for Baltimore City Public Schools. And so since there is 5 minutes left, I'm going to hand this back to you, Janelle, for you to close us out.
Okay, well, with that, Ms. Hood Wilson, if you have any questions for the group, please, now's your time to ask.
I do not, actually. I really look forward to hearing whether or not I've been able to move forward. I guess instead of asking a question, I would just like to thank you so much for giving me your time this evening and really thoughtful questions. I know that you asked me to be concise, and that's not my strong suit. But again, I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you, and please have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, take care. Okay, we have about 4 minutes before our next interview starts, so if you need to get a drink, now would be the time. And Jeanette, please let us know when our next candidate is in the waiting room.
Yes, Mark is in the waiting room. I will let him in at 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are we all back and seated? All right, Jeanette, please let in our next person. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the interview for the Board of School Commissioners. My name is Janelle Penny, and I am the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Tonight, you will be interviewed by our community panel, and I will introduce our members. We have Christiana Diggs from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from Parent and Community Advisory Board, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City. Okay, Ms. Phillips is no longer with us. And then Dr. Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I would like to remind you that this interview is being recorded and will be made available to the public. And you are also going to have 30 minutes for your interview. So please make sure that your answers are thorough yet succinct. And with that, I will turn it over to Christiana for the first question.
Janelle, I don't think Christiana is here.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually,
Please.
yeah, I'm filling in for Christiana. My name is Cameron Askew. I'm also with the Associated Student Congress.
Okay, thank you. Cameron, please take the first question.
Okay. So my first question is, I'm curious to know about your current understanding of the priorities and operations of city schools, including the blueprint for success, if you're familiar with it.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I am somewhat familiar with the blueprint for success. I did quite a bit of reading in advance of this. I was a Baltimore City school teacher and have worked in city schools, but have been professionally outside of the school system for some time. So I did a great deal of research on the 3 pillars of the blueprint for success around student wholeness and literacy and staff leadership, and would, if selected as a commissioner, would become incredibly much more familiar with those with those plans as well.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, next question. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Sure. So I think that the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to maintain the public trust and to provide oversight and accountability to the CEO and to the direction of the school system overall. Their role is to set policy and ensure the efficient use of resources and provide counsel to the CEO, as well as hiring and evaluating them. The CEO's role is to work in partnership with the board, as well as all of the school system's staff, as well as students, parents, families, communities, to allocate resources and set expectations and make sure that the school system continues to progress. So I think it is it is the relationship between the board and the CEO is a partnership, but one that requires a lot of accountability and oversight.
Hi, Mark. My name is Diamond Tate Brown, and I'm wondering your thoughts around the negotiations of unions and just the dynamics. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions. So what do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
Sure. I have some familiarity with the dynamics of unions in the school system, having been a dues-paying BTU member in my role as a city schools teacher, and then on the leadership team of a charter network, and both of those roles were during contract negotiations. I think ultimately the board's responsibility is to negotiate in good faith for arrangements that best serve our students, which I think is the ultimate aim of the bargaining units as well. I understand that some of the current issues are around professional development and accurate and timely payroll processing, teacher career path negotiations, and compensation for class coverage. So I'm somewhat familiar with those issues.
Hi, Mark. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities? And have you had to experience responding to the needs of a student or person with a disability?
Yes, absolutely. I as a middle school science teacher, I taught students with disabilities and had to meet IEP and 504 accommodations. That was part of my my training to be a teacher and my experience in the classroom. The school that I taught at had a significant number of students with disabilities, as well as a very large ESOL population. So I've had firsthand experience as an educator trying to meet the needs of those kind of diverse learners.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. The school system has a budget of somewhere between 1.6 and $1.7 billion. And part of the role of the board is to approve the budget each year and oversee the budget and expenditures from that budget. I obviously have no expectation that you've managed or directly been involved with a $1.7 billion budget, but can you share what experiences you have had working with budgets, the role you've played with that budget, and a sense of the size and scope of that budget, and how you approach budget management?
Sure. I guess I'll start with approach. I think budgeting is how an organization allocates resources towards its priorities. So it's got to start with what goals the institution is setting, and what are the things they're trying to accomplish, and how to best accomplish them, and then allocating the resources you have towards those ends. I have pretty significant experience managing school and organization budgets of varying sizes across a number of different organizations. I've directly managed budgets ranging from hundreds of thousands to about $96 million in an annual operating budget. And I've played many different roles in my career related to budgets, including projecting and analyzing revenue, grant reporting, setting and managing organizational budgets, reporting, to boards and financial modeling. And that's kind of been as both an external consultant as well as an executive of an organization, and in my role at Johns Hopkins University's finance office, and my current role at the Hopkins School of Nursing. I would say the only other crutch I lean on when I wear that hat is I majored in finance and economics in college.
Hi, Mark. My question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
I think that charter schools play an important role in the school system's portfolio. You know, I've worked in both traditional and charter environments, and I think every student has different needs, and some of those students' needs can be best met at a school that's a right fit. And you know, in our system, charters can play a role in piloting new approaches that we can learn from and scale. But like all schools, they need appropriate resources to meet their mission, and they need appropriate accountability and oversight. And I think, you know, Maryland charter law is structured in a way that allows local districts to ensure both those resources and the accountability and oversight.
How you doing, Mark? So my question is centered around, please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think that engagement is an important necessity for a school district success. People, I think, need to know where we're collectively going as a system, and be invested and engaged in that. And I think that requires providing some agency into the decision-making process. So I think part of both the responsibility of the board as well as the system itself is to make sure that they are engaging with students and families and community and educators to do that. And from a governance perspective, I think that's, you know, actively engaging with the community and listening through the existing avenues of public comment, surveys, forums, other opportunities for listening. But they also need to make sure that there's adequate kind of feedback loops for the board to understand the public perception or of decisions, of how people are engaged in those decision-making processes, so that people have a voice and can be part of that and feel the ownership of the things that are happening in the district.
Good evening, Mark. I've got a question. It's going to be two parts, basically. Oftentimes you'll find that where the board and the administration wants to go may differ from where communities and parents want to go. As a board member, how would you deal with that effectively? How would you try to reconcile that? But also, on the flip side, what if you agreed more with the parents and the community association? How comfortable would you feel taking that back to the Board of Commissioners and dealing with it from that angle?
Yeah. I think I guess to part one of your question, I think it's about, and I think it still goes back to engagement and the need for the board and the district to be engaged with stakeholders and really, you know, if there is disagreement over a decision, being able to share the reasoning and the intended impact and consequences of that decision, and really try to be as transparent as possible with all of the stakeholders to ensure that people can see the process that occurred to result in the decision and the reasoning behind that. To the second part of your question, I think every commissioner is called to bring their expertise and their perspective and engage with stakeholders in the community and the board and the school system to come to decisions when it's time to take a vote. So if there was a situation in which I felt strongly that students' interests would be best served by choosing A and not B, then I would not have a problem, saying my case and choosing voting in a way that might not be the majority view of the board. But I also think that I'm the type of person who would be able to be persuaded. I wouldn't be, don't walk into any experience with my views on something set in stone. So, I would actively participate in the board meetings and hear what stakeholders and community groups have to say, hear what fellow commissioners have to say, and come to a conclusion that feels like it is in the best interest of students.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good afternoon, Mark, or evening. It is evening now. So to be on record, I just want to say I was Mark's administrator, so I will not be participating in the vote as I was his former principal. But what I do have a question. So the question I have is, what was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the result of that decision.
Sure. So I used to run a statewide LGBTQ civil rights advocacy nonprofit here in Maryland. And there was a bill that we had been working on that was related to state changes to state issued IDs that would have had a really positive impact on gender diverse community members. And it took a very long time to build a coalition and to get a bill together and to be in Annapolis talking to legislators. And it felt like we were very close to the finish line. And kind of in the 11th hour, the bill got saddled with some problematic amendments. And those amendments would have kind of disproportionately disadvantaged youth. And I guess one of our my organization's largest fears is that it would have set a precedent to exclude youth from future legislation concerning gender identity and other kind of protections. And we went and discussed with our coalition partners, many of whom really wanted to push it through, even with the bad amendments. After a lot of deliberation and discussion, we didn't feel like we could pass this bill with that amendment in a way that would have, benefited many at the expense of a few. And so we wound up withdrawing our support from the bill and having to kind of navigate that dynamic with our coalition partners in a way that we could continue to work with those partners in future legislative sessions on different topics. But it was a very difficult decision and to make, and a very difficult kind of process to go through with our coalition partners. But that I hope that was an example. That was the first one that popped into my head.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. And so I'm going to take start back with the top with the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. Cameron, do you have a question that you want to ask?
Yes, I do. So my next question is, what's the most valuable leadership experience that you've had, and how do you think that'll impact your role as a commissioner?
I think teaching in city schools is the most valuable leadership experience I've had that would benefit me as a commissioner. It was that experience in the classroom that instilled in me a commitment and dedication to the city's students and a commitment to educational equity and excellence. And that's guided kind of all of my other professional experiences. I think the specific skills and perspectives that I think I could bring to benefit the Board of School Commissioners is my experiences in organizational development, management, and policy. I think that paired with my experience in governance, organizational governance could provide value to the board. I know that the composition of the board is specifically structured to have a diverse set of perspectives and skills on it, and that felt like an area where I felt like I could best contribute.
Wonderful. And we want to leave ample time for you to ask question marks. So we will take one last question from the community panel. If anyone has a burning question that they would like to ask, we'll take one last question.
Janelle, I'll ask another question. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or on what topics you would hold the district CEO accountable. How should the board evaluate the CEO? What components of the CEO's job should be assessed?
Sure. I think that the board should ultimately evaluate the CEO based on the outcomes and direction of the system and student achievement. That I think has to be based in data. But I also think that all those kind of ultimate outcomes take precedent, that process is important too. We talked a little bit today about the importance of community engagement and agency and decision making. And I think when big changes are happening, that kind of how we get there can be important and valuable. So I think those are things that the board should be holding the CEO accountable for. And I think that the goals, the board has already set some kind of measurable goals related to the City Schools Blueprint for Success. And those are, I think, very important areas to be looking at. And I think that that blueprint, definitely shows a lot of robust thinking around the student wholeness composite score, setting literacy goals, and a focus on school climate are all important things that the board should be considering when evaluating the CEO.
Thank you so much. Mark, at this point, if you have any questions for the community panel, please feel free to ask.
Sure. I didn't know that I would have the opportunity to do that, so I didn't prepare anything in advance. But I guess, what if you were summing up in a few characteristics what you all are looking for in candidates for school commissioner, what would some of those be?
Mark, I would say one thing I would add to your last response about assessing the CEO, I would also want the board to consider the health of the workforce in that assessment.
Thank you.
I might also add just frankly independence, a willingness to really assess situations and have the independence and I don't know, I'm going to use the word courage, I guess, to vote, as you were talking about earlier, one's conscience about what is right for kids, even when it is really difficult to do so.
Okay, well, with that, I believe we have come to the end of our time. Mark, we thank you so much for your time this evening. You'll be hearing back from Mr. Ariel Giles, who has been facilitating this process on Monday with final results of the selection and any next steps if necessary.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for your time this evening. And Dr. Brooks, it was great to see you virtually. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you. Okay, we again have a few minutes before our next candidate hops on.
And
So we
Mr.
will...
Simmons is in the waiting room. I will let him in at 6:30.
All right, thank you so much. Now let me just do a check on who is still online. I believe Mr. Jason Green, you said that you have to leave now for your next meeting, correct?
Yeah, I have a few minutes. They haven't exactly started, so I got a few minutes. If I can get in my question, I will, but I may not. But I'm gonna have to recuse myself anyway for Larry scoring. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll stay and ask a question. I won't be able to score Larry, but I'm going to step out real quick and walk my dogs. I got my dogs out. They're letting me know they need to go outside.
Okay.
I'm curious to know, is there like an order of which questions are being asked that I'm not caught up on? Because it seemed that it was going very like fluidly the last time. So this is my first time here. So
Yes. So actually, Cameron, so you are going to be the first question asked out the gate every time. For the most part, people have been asking the same questions. We are doing, because we have quite a few panelists on the line, we are doing one question each. And then at the end, if there's time for a second question, you will be given preference to ask that second question. And then it'll be open to the group to ask one additional question after that. Did Christiana give you the notes on the question that she has been asking?
yeah, she did.
Okay. So then that
and I'm gonna step out for about 5 minutes after I ask my first question.
Okay, great. This, as we said, all the sessions are recorded, so you can always listen to the recording for anything that you missed, but that'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right, give it one more minute.
When Jason has to leave, would it be okay if I take the partnership and community engagement question? I didn't know how that was going to work, but if people are dropping off, then it seems like people would have to ask more than one. And as Baltimore Family Alliance, I feel like I should ask a question in the partnership community engagement piece.
That'd be great, Brianna, for me.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, so then just to note that after we get through the first round, I'll send it back to Cameron and then over to you, Brianna, to ask that question. Sounds good?
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Okay, fantastic. All right, it's 6:30. Our new person been let in. Okay. Hi, Mr. Larry Simmons.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Janelle Penny, and I'm the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. This evening, you will be interviewed by the community panel, and representing the panel is Cameron Askew from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from the Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from the Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from the Parent and Community Advisory Board, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. This meeting is going to be recorded and will be made available to the public afterwards. We also would like to remind you that this interview will take approximately 30 minutes, so please be sure to answer each question thoroughly and succinctly. If we have any time left over after the rounds of formal questions, then the floor will be turned over to you for you to ask your questions back to the group. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Cameron to start us with the first question.
Thank you.
Hi, Larry. I'm curious to know what your current understanding of the current priorities and operations of city schools are, including the blueprint for success, if you're familiar with it.
Yep, I'm pretty familiar with the blueprint, specifically in the space of student wholeness and and school connectedness. I believe that it has been a document that has been truly able to guide some of the work of the district, and along with some of the work with the state when it comes to young people and supporting administration and teachers alike. I don't have much more to say on it.
Thank you. The next question is, can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Well, ultimately the school board is the governing body of the CEO or the superintendent of schools. There should be some type of partnership that's happening, but also the school board is a support system for decisions that are being made by the superintendent. So there's that overlap that kind of happens when board and school leadership, the district leadership are working together. But then there's also the oversight that the school board has to maintain when it comes to the work of the superintendent, along with contracts, along with funding opportunities that may come into the school. So there's an opportunity to work together, but then there's also this governing piece that happens from and by the school board.
Hi, Larry. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees as unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and the unions that represent city schools employees?
I'm pretty familiar, and I believe that most industries really cannot survive without the unions that are supporting its workers. I believe that one of the main issues that we are facing, and that we're facing, and that the this the BTU is uplifting is really making sure that we have a national search for a superintendent. We have just secured a contract for a year, but we really want to make sure that we are digging in and being able to provide a full search and full support for a new superintendent, or the continued work of our current superintendent.
Good evening. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities? And do you have any experience, or have you had an experience where you had to meet the needs of a student or person with a disability?
Yes, as a former community school coordinator and OST provider, we had to, make decisions on how do we support all of the students in our building. Oftentimes we have students who have 504s or 504s or other type of supports that are needed, and oftentimes are left out of the after school space. And the last school that I was in, we really tried to work very hard to make sure that we were able to support not just our students who didn't have who didn't have learning disabilities or didn't have physical disabilities, but we wanted to really make sure that we were completely inclusive of all students. And so we were able to really bring on another partner to support those students who had disabilities so that they could also participate in after school programming as well.
Thank you.
Hey, Larry. As I think you know, the school system has a budget that is somewhere between 1.6 and $1.7 billion. And part of the role of the board is to approve the budget each year and to oversee the expenditures associated with that budget. And I just like to caveat this question by saying I don't expect anyone's had a lot of experience with a $1.7 billion budget, but can you talk about experiences you have had managing budgets, explaining a little bit about what your role was, what your approach is to budget management, and sort of the sense of the size and scale of the budget?
Okay, so about 6 or 7 years ago, Baltimore received $5 million from SAMHSA to address stress and trauma and after civil unrest. I was the director of youth and trauma programs at the health department that was in charge of those funds. I worked with a community group. We developed a community board, worked with community to make sure that we put those funds out in the way that the grant was written and that it was in an equitable way. And so many of you might be familiar with Recast or B-City. That came out of that work. And to this day, we're still working as our own standalone 501c3, not under the health department any longer, and really still managing funds to distribute out to the city's organizations who have a youth development focus. I currently am also the chair of the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund, and just last night approved the new budget for our FY25, and really working with the executive director and our finance team to make sure that we are getting funds, that our funds are coming from the city in the right way, and then that we're dispersing them in an equitable way. So like really being able to have conversation with those folks who are really managing those monies so that we aren't overspending, that we are hitting our deliverables, and that we're making sure that we are spending in the way that we said that we would spend. We have, I don't want to go too much into that personal part, but I really understand that process and really and understand what it is to kind of work in a team as a team to get that work done. It's not anything that I've ever held by myself.
Hi, Larry. You probably know what question I'm going to ask, but what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
I believe that as we move forward, that charter schools have to begin to play a larger role in the portfolio. I believe that we are not addressing or supporting charter schools in the way that we should, and looking at them as a part of the traditional school system. I oftentimes see that differentiated in literature and even often in funding and support. But I believe that charter schools are serving our young people, whether they're in a traditional school or not. They're still students of Baltimore City Public School.
Larry, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. Evening.
Evening, yeah. So on a grading scale of Baltimore City schools overall, on an A to F grading scale, what grade would you give them currently, and why would you give them that grade?
I would give a C plus, and I don't know if you can do pluses, and that's basically I believe that we've had an opportunity over the last couple of years coming out of COVID to really rethink how we educate and rethink the way that we work, and we haven't completely stepped into that. I think that there's been opportunities without having young people in the building for us to really kind of dig into reimagining what educating urban students would be, and I don't think that we have taken have completely taken hold of that. I believe and I know just from my own experience and my own work that we are in the steps of it and we are looking to do better. But I think that there's a lot of work that still needs to happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good evening, Larry. How are you?
Good evening.
What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the results of that decision.
The hardest decision that I had to make was when I was a community school coordinator and we were in the midst of school merging. We were told that our school would not be a part of the swing space. We knew that we would merge, but we didn't know that we would have or be a part of swing space. And so having to go back to communities, to a community that was already upset that they were losing their school, was a pretty tough conversation, but was able to begin to build community with the school that our young people were moving into. And really, the hard part of that was knowing how much that school meant to not only the families, but also to the community because it had been there for so long and so many generations of folks have gone through the building. But the shining part of it is that a beautiful community school, a beautiful school community came out of it. We were able to really push on the district and say, hey, if you're going to merge schools, then young people and families should be a part of the name changing. And the tough part of that is that I was in transition, but was in transition from a community school coordinator and moving over to the health department. And so was kind of in and out of the conversation when it was the naming conversation. And so the education that the young people got when it came to the selection of the name was very, very minimal. And I believe that if I was there and my colleagues, because we both were kind of in transition, if we were there, we would have done more education versus pictures and movies, but really kind of got into who these people were so that the students and the families would have had a much better and a much more educated choice in the naming of their school. And I'll leave that alone, leave the name out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cameron, are you back yet? I know Cameron had to step out. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brianna Kaufman for our next question.
Thank you. Can you please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level?
I believe that you can't serve people if they're not a part of the conversation, right? So we often make a lot of decisions and do a lot of things to communities and to young people without them being a part of the solution or any of the work. I believe that they are a very, very, very important piece to all of the work that all of us do. And they have to be central in all decisions that are being made.
Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or on what topics you would hold the district's CEO accountable. How should the board evaluate the CEO? what components of the CEO's job should be assessed?
I think one is the fundraising that happens and that should happen with a leader like that, like the CEO. I think also the engagement, like the authentic engagement that happens with school leaders, students, and families. I know that there is an evaluation system that the chairs and co-chair use and making choices and decisions when it comes to the CEO's pay and other contractual issues. But I believe that everyone should be a part of that decision process, or at least all of the board members should be a part of that process, and not something that is just held to one or two people. And I think that that evaluation process should also be developed or partially developed by the board and community stakeholders. Did I answer?
Thanks.
I have an additional question. What role do you think systemic racism has played in the school system in Baltimore, and how should district leaders address its legacy?
I love that. That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that systemic racism has played and continues to play a large role in what happens at city schools. I mean, for us to be a majority minority city, we still have our young people that are still struggling to make way, struggling to find pathways to adult success. So I think that, again, it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. We have had these opportunities to really rethink how we do education in Baltimore City. And I think that oftentimes we are looking for outsiders of something that's supposed to come and kind of save us when we're all right here to do the work. I think that some of us have to take our own time and kind of look into ourselves and see what are the dissonance that we have when we're working with young people. What are the things that I bring to the table that oftentimes can hold things up? And once we begin to value young people in a way that they should be valued, we begin to make space and make way. I think that too often we have folks and systems that have been in place for way too long or have been in seats for way too long. And it's time, I think, for us to open ourselves up to the new and be flexible, and to look at young people as a valued part of their education and their own success. And that's hard to do, right? That's hard to do when many of us have been in control, many of us have been in leadership. It's hard to do, to make space and to share space. And I think that we have an opportunity to do much better at that.
Thank you.
I have an additional question. Larry, as you know, there's a bit of lobbying that goes on with this, lobbying for children and families inside the city with the legislature. What do you think is the most effective way to lobby for children and families inside Baltimore City with the school system?
Is with and children and families, right?
Right.
Like, again, it gets, I think I'll just keep going back to this, right? That we do so much or do too much oftentimes that's supposed to be for, but we don't include folks in those conversations or in those decisions, right? And so it's one thing. I'll give you an example. When I was running after school programs back in the late 90s, right? When people really didn't even believe that after school programs should exist, we would have to parade our children in front of City Hall just so that money was put in the budget for the next year, right? Just kind of proving that programming has happened, that kids are learning and kids are happy. We don't have to do that, right? We don't have to do that anymore. And we should have never had to do it at the beginning. Because we know that when you invest in communities, when you invest in families, children do better. communities do better, right? Especially when you are investing in things that already exist within those neighborhoods and within those communities. A lot of times, shiny, bright new things come to Baltimore and we jump on them, but oftentimes it's not the thing for our city, especially when there are programs and opportunities that are already existing that we have not fully supported or funded.
Thank you.
We like shiny.
Everybody likes shiny.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone would like to ask one final question before we turn it over to you, Mr. Simmons, to ask your questions, please do so now.
I'll
Okay.
ask another question. Larry, say you get selected to be on the school board. What would be your first, like, maybe month or 2 months? What would you do first? Like, you're on the school board. What would your first maybe 3 things or 3 steps be once you know you have once you know you have a position or something?
Yeah. I think about that often, and I think one, the first thing is for me to kind of dig into learning more about processes and things that have taken place prior to me that will still kind of affect me, like from past, but that we're still kind of living in, and how if they are detrimental things, like how do we begin those conversations on changing them, right? I don't want to jump right in and rally around issues or issues that don't align with my own values. I do understand that the board is made up with a bunch of different ideas and a bunch of personalities and just, folks just coming from different places. And so I want to make sure that I maintain my lane and what aligns to my values and to keep that centered in all of the work that I do. And so just kind of, feeling the lay of the land, learning a little more about some of the history of why things exist, and then really begin to think about, where are the places that I can rally and where are the places that I can use my knowledge of what I bring to the organization.
Thank you. Mr. Simmons, do you have any questions for the panel?
I do. And it's just one. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who is here, who's asked questions. And I apologize. I was a little nervous, which is very different from me, but it was fumbled a little bit at the beginning, but I feel good. But I do want to know knowing where we are now, what is if there is an example of like that shiny or that perfect, I don't want to use perfect, but that board member that will be what's the shiny board member for you? What is that person? How is that person made up, and what do they bring? That's for anybody.
I think for me, Roger said this for the last candidate, very similar, like someone who's an independent thinker, someone who is willing to question the decisions and not just uphold the status quo. I think a lot about I used to teach at KIPP and it's all about like drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever. I want someone who's not willing to drink the Kool-Aid, like someone who is going in willing to form their own opinions and stay true to those opinions and listen to the community, listen to parents, listen to students. They're out visiting schools and they're acting in a more autonomous way than I think we've seen historically.
I'll just say this really quick too, and this wasn't a question, but I just want to share this. I think also a part of why I'm here is that when I was in schools, I had experiences where I thought I was going to get support and I did not get the support. And I don't want to be that. I want to be able to provide the support that people who are in buildings every single day, who are oftentimes looking for someone to just say, "Hey, great job," or even be able to have conversation. I want to be able to be that, and I think that I come with that experience, and so being on the flip side is very important to me. And most of the work that I do, I come from that experience. I always tell folks I started this work as Mr. Larry and now I'm Mr. Simmons. So I've worked my way through. And I think that at this point in my career and just who I am now, I think that I would be a great fit for the school board. So that was my 2 cents.
Okay. Any final questions, Mr. Simmons?
Nope. I don't.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for your time this evening. The group will be meeting again tomorrow, and decisions will be made public on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank
you all
you
have
so
a good
much.
evening.
You too. All right. We have 4 minutes before the next candidate gets on. That is, okay, Devin Sutherland. And let me just check. Cameron, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay, all right. Great. So Cameron is back. Jason is off, and so is Phillips. Okay. All right. So the next interview will start exactly at 7. So you have a few minutes before that.
Devin is not in the waiting room yet. So I will let you know as soon as they are.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, and Demente, I just saw your message. So we are actually going to 8:30 today because Tuesday we had 7 candidates. Today we have 8. So our last one will start at 8 o'clock and we'll be wrapping by 8:30.
Got it. Okay, 1.5 hours to go, guys. Yay, we're still doing great.
We're pushing through.
Just letting you know that Devin is in the waiting room. I will let her in at 7 o'clock.
Okay, everyone seated? And Jeanette, please let our next person in.
Hello.
Hi, Devin. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
My name is Janelle Penny. I am the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Tonight, you will be interviewed by our community panel. And on our panel is Cameron Askew from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from Jason Green is not with us anymore. I'll move to the next person. We have Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. You are going to have an opportunity to ask questions at the end when the panel finishes their list of questions. I just want to remind you that this meeting is recorded and it will be made available to the public. Also that you have 30 minutes. And so please make sure that your answers are both thorough and succinct. And with that, I will hand it over to Cameron to kick us off with the first question.
Hi, Devon. So with my first question, I'm curious to know what your current understanding of the dynamic between the school board and the unions and organizations that represent city schools, employees, and community groups are.
Okay, first, my name it's Devin. It's not Devon.
Oh, sorry.
It happens to me a lot. It's happened my whole life, but I just wanted to share that really quick. Primarily, I'm not fully sure of the relationship, or should I say the working relationship between the teachers union and the Board of School Commissioners. I just know that the Board of School Commissioners is something that I've heard about maybe within the past, I'd say 4 or 5 years. So essentially, I'm not familiar with the relationship, but I would like to learn more about how they work together effectively.
Good evening. My name is Brianna, and I got Brianna all the time growing up, so I understand. So can you tell us why you believe you would be a good school commissioner? And please include in your answer if there's any particular issues that motivate you to serve.
I think that I would be a great school commissioner, primarily because I'm a parent of a city school student, but then also I'm a product of Baltimore City Public Schools K through 12. I'm also the parent of a child with special needs. So in addition to being the parent of a child in city schools and public schools and navigating the special education process from beginning in his earlier educational years to now, I think that I would be an excellent candidate because I feel that I represent a specific portion of the community that can navigate both not knowing and not hearing about everything that's going on, but then at the same time, I'm a person that goes to seek information and I try to get that information and get it to other people.
Hi, Devin. My name is Diamante, so I'm certain you already know my whole life about pronunciations. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or on what topics you would hold the district's CEO accountable. How should the board evaluate the CEO? What components of the CEO's job should be assessed?
I don't know if it's something that currently exists, but I feel like, or I believe that if a person is serving the school system and serving city schools, then I think it would be important if their children were attendees of public schools in Baltimore City. And that's no slight to the CEO, but it's just something that's important to me because if you're within a community, then you understand some of the challenges, frustrations that are happening or going on because you're within it with everyone. And I feel like there's a sense of understanding. I don't know if that's something that's required of the current CEO, but I would hope or imagine that that's something that is a requirement down the line for the next CEO when that time comes. I think that's important.
Good evening. You mentioned that you are the parent of a child with special needs. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities? And what's been your experience with having to meet the needs of student or person with a disability?
I'm familiar with the rights of students with special needs specifically because I know my son receives an IEP, and I know that the IEP is a legal document, and I know that it's binding. I know and I feel empowered to know that the information within that document is something that has to be reached, it has to be enforced, and the school that he attends has to do their very, very, very best to follow and uphold everything within that document. I know and I'm empowered enough over time to understand that if the school isn't, following through or not meeting the needs of my child, I know the steps to take to seek further action, and not feel that I have no other course of action and I have nowhere else to turn.
Thank you.
Sorry, had trouble getting to my mute button. Thanks for being here. One of the responsibilities of the board is to approve and oversee the budget of the school system, and to approve expenditures related to that budget. Can you share with me any experiences you've had managing a budget and give me a sense of what your role, or give all of us a sense of what your role was in that process and how you approached it, and any information you have about the size and scale of the budget, fully recognizing I don't expect it to be the size of the school system's budget or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Outside of just being a working parent, I'm fully aware of overseeing a budget within my home, but within, work-related spaces, I'm most recently familiar with managing the budget of my previous experience with the Open Society Institute Baltimore Community Fellows program. Within that program, over the course of 18 months, we were each awarded a $65,000 award. And from there, it was up to us to budget that award based on, our own needs within our personal lives, as well as looking at how we can utilize those funds to help with expanding our programs. Additionally, I've given supportive oversight with smaller budgets. So with summer camp programs with the Druid Heights Community Development Corporation, and smaller like programs with events with Live Baltimore and things like that. But nothing huge. The largest I've ever had is primarily through the Baltimore Community Fellows Program.
Hi. So my question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
I've always thought of charter schools as being something really awesome and amazing within the city schools landscape, primarily because I felt, or at least from my experience, um, being on the outside of them, I've always thought that they provided a space for parents to have a bit more insight on the curriculum and the activities that take place within, while still adhering to whatever the guidelines are for city schools. I feel like that, charter schools are just another space to help parents with navigating, a more either specialized course of action for their child's education. I feel that charter schools are other or smaller spaces or smaller class sizes. So I feel like they're a benefit, but I don't I guess on the other side of that, I feel like there are some families that still feel like they can't get that great experience, like the small classroom experience, the feeling of having any input on how their child's curriculum is developed over time within the public school sphere, and I don't feel that's the case. So I feel like charter schools are a great thing, but I feel like some parents may feel like charter schools are the option because they can't have those things in public school.
All right. So oftentimes we'll find that there may be issues between where the school board is leading and where communities and parents want to lead. If those two areas were not running parallel, how would you try to work with them to bring them together?
I think that it would be a good idea to have a great representation of the community as a part of the school board. Um, I think that it would also be a great idea to allow or share as much transparency as possible within the community to help them with understanding why the school board isn't going in the direction or they aren't aligning in the same space. I know that misalignments can be very small and they can be very large. But I think that it's important for the school board to be as transparent as possible as to why their policies or their direction is not aligned with the community, and then also be open to a discussion about how they could reach, an agreement or meet in the middle down the line.
Thank
you. Good evening. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
Now impacting all youth or my youth in particular?
It could be youth, it could be a decision impacting a youth. It could be you give an example.
Okay. I think one of the hardest decisions that I had as a parent was feeling like I couldn't send my son to our neighborhood school right down the street, because at the time he was maybe 4 years old, and the closest school said that they wouldn't be able to support his educational needs. I didn't know at the time that I could advocate and ask for more and, what route to take from there. So I accepted the recommendation to have him go to a school that to me felt like it was so far away because he was my little guy and he was 4 years old and he'd have to take a bus all the way to Garrett Heights from our home. And over time, I felt like, okay, this is not as scary as I thought it would be, but I can understand how scary and frustrating it can be for a parent if things don't go or present the way that you need them to be. Thankfully, in my experience, I feel like I had communicative staff members and a welcoming school community for him. and a group of understanding, like support staff around him that were helpful to us. But at the time, I felt like it was a challenging decision for both me, and Liam's dad to make. If we would have gone another route, I'm not really sure what direction he would have taken if we hadn't taken that step to let him go with the educational recommendation that we were given.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to take it back to Cameron. Do you have a second question?
I do. So, in your career, what's been your most prominent leadership position, and how would that affect, the landscape of you being a school board commissioner? Like, what part of that experience would help you in your next stage?
Oh my goodness, Cameron. My biggest and most profound is the OSI Baltimore Community Fellowship. With my organization, Brown on the Spectrum, I started it as a space to share information and resources to families and caregivers of children with autism. But under the OSI Fellowship, I looked at how I could develop Brown on the Spectrum as a living, breathing space for young people like my son, who was aging, to find space within the community for work experience. Um, and one of the most impactful things that I thought about when submitting the letter of interest to that fellowship was, what is Baltimore City's workforce landscape going to look like for Liam when he's old enough and looking for work? And what is that landscape going to look like for children like Liam who may not even have an official diagnosis, of any sort that would give him or give them extra like supports that they need to just, function as a regular everyday person just looking for work to support themselves. With going through the 18-month process of that fellowship, I gained the confidence to then approach Baltimore's landscape around creating, supportive environments and supportive education and supportive programming, or at least be there to support organizations that are looking to provide like greater opportunities for our young people. I can't stress enough that there are so many young people that are, out here every day undiagnosed, without the supports that they need, without the extra help that they need, and through no fault of their own. So what does that look like for them when they want to go out and find a way to take care of themselves? If our landscape is not ready for them and not set up in a way to assist them, then where does that leave them? So for me, my biggest highlight was that work with the OSI Fellowship, because it helped me to just be extra armed and ready to get into every space that I can to create a better landscape for work, not only for my son Liam, but for other kids just like him.
Can you please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision making at the district level?
I think that it would be important for families to know specifically about what a person's role is within the district and how that affects their children at the most basic level. I think it's important for families to know just how many players are involved in helping to create a successful school year, or even to create a school year. I know that at the beginning of the school year, we talk about, oh, well, where is my child going to go to school this year? Where's the letter that's coming? Like, where's the letter that's coming? Where's the information that's coming? Who can I call? Where's this? Where is that? There's so many key players that are involved in supporting a family and supporting one single child, but I think it's important for families to be able to get access to information about what organizations within Baltimore City Public Schools directly impact and support them. I know that it's important for families to connect when there's terrible things going on or if they have questions about things, but I also think it's important for families to reach out and have spaces and avenues to talk about when things are going great. But then as an aside, I also think it's super important for families to make sure that schools are notified about all their updated contact information and their updated addresses and their updated emergency contact information and all the other important information that they need at the beginning of the year, because I know that opens up a whole can of other things. So it's important for families to be just as responsive with updated information as much as families on this side can talk about, I can't reach anybody at Baltimore City Schools. There's no good number. Well, we need good numbers for families too.
Janelle, you want another question?
Yes, we should have time for one more question, then we'll turn it over to Ms. Sutherland to ask questions.
Okay. Devin, you seem to have a great analysis on what parents and students, what can accommodate them, especially if they are a student with special needs or a parent that is caring for a student with special needs. I wanted to share some information with you on the workforce side and wondering if you could choose like one tangible thing that you would approach as a board member to connect this bridge. If you could share some thoughts. So we want to deliver the best services, but there's a lot of gaps in the resources that the special education workforce needs to do their jobs. For example, our one-on-one aides, which are our special education paraeducators, they don't get paid well, but they're expected to do a lot. Many of our special education teachers are conditionally certified, and they cannot do third-party billing. So this ends up falling on fully certified special educators. Our IEP chairs want to make certain that their files are locked. So they need locked doors and keys to go to them so that they can actually get in the files and lock them. We don't have a school psychologist. I think we're like 1,200 to one school psychologist, and the APA says recommends 1 to 500. We have a low amount of speech language pathologists. So knowing all of this, but if you were to be on the school board, that is the end of the decision making when it comes to Baltimore City Public Schools. How do you bridge this gap? What would you tackle, if anything, so that it's not just, this is what things should look like, but how do we actually get there?
I think with any challenge, it's always a good idea to look at, okay, so what do we have right now that is working for us? So if I think about the ratio between speech and language pathologists and our schools, I'm looking at that from a space of, okay, so where are we getting our speech and language pathologists from? How are we recruiting them? Does Baltimore City Public Schools have any special incentivized pipelines for special educators, paraeducators, speech and language pathologists? What does that look like? And is that something that can be done? I think about, I'm really just thinking to myself, like, if there's no wiggle room and there's no space, it's challenging to even look at which one to tackle first because they all work together. It's a really tough question. It really is. because I'm just honestly thinking about it. Like, I don't even know what the infrastructure is like. I don't even know what the turnaround time is like for anything. So it's really hard to even pick which one to go for first because I don't know what the timeline is for any of them or which one to even choose.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at this time, Devin, do you have any questions for the panelists?
I think one question that I really have is if each of you could share briefly, and I would usually say like 3 adjectives, but I'll just say because of the size of the panel, if each of you could share one adjective that really describes like the ideal candidates for the Board of Commissioners, what would that adjective be? You can add a couple of, supporting words into it if you like, but, for sake of time, if all of you could share with me, that would be great.
I think I would say independent.
I would say someone who's a visionary.
I would say radical.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
I would say transformative.
I would say fair and empathetic.
I'm going to say inclusive.
I'm going to say humble.
That was great. We have time for one more question. Devin, do you have anything else you want to ask?
No, I don't have any. I don't have any more questions. Those are really helpful. I guess my one thing that I'm thinking of is to want someone that's, radical and independent, and transformative. Would you all say, or would you be in agreement that the Board of School Commissioners is a space where that can happen?
It depends on what you're up for, Devin, but it is possible.
Okay.
Well, Devin, we thank you again for your time this evening. The committee will be meeting tomorrow to deliberate, and the results will be made public, and everyone will be hearing back on Monday about next steps. So we thank you again for your time, and we wish you have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you. Do the same. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cut.
Shauna is in the waiting room.
Okay, do we have most of our team seated? It's 4 minutes to 8, so we can wait, but just wanted to check if we are all back. Okay, Jeanette, can you let Shauna in?
Yes, doing it now.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Shauna. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Janelle Penny. I am the Chief of Staff for the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Tonight, you will be interviewed by the community panel, which consists of Cameron Askew from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Brianna Kaufman from the Baltimore Family Alliance, Diamante Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union, Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, and Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success.
Hi, everyone.
So before we get started, I would like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public. You will have 30 minutes to interview with the panelists, and in the final about 5 minutes or so, we will hand it over to you to ask the panel questions. Please keep your answers very thorough, but also succinct so that we can make sure that we have time for all the panelists to ask you questions and give you a fair amount of time to ask your questions as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Cameron for the first question.
Hi, Shauna. So this question comes in two parts. The first part is, what's your current impression of the alignment between the Board of Commissioners and the parents and the city schools community? And the second part is, how would you respond when these two groups are not aligned?
So, as someone who formerly worked in Baltimore City Public Schools, I understand the importance of alignment between any community groups and the parents that our students are with. So, one thing that I know that is extremely important, especially when it comes to education or just children who are involved in our system in general, is that they are being cared for holistically. So their needs are being met, not just educationally, but social, emotionally as well. And so when you have a board like the Board of Commissioners who is seeking out to make sure that our community is heard as far as the decisions that are being made when it comes to their education, when it comes to their educational rights and things of that nature, it's extremely important to have parent involvement because we are dealing with their children. They know their children the best. They understand their children's needs. And a lot of parents sometimes don't have the resources or the knowledge to know exactly what to do. And so it's important that we would use our mission and vision to make sure that the things that we implement are for the purpose of them to give them their children the best lives possible. Now, for your second part, when there is not alignment, and when there's even confusion between what the goals of the parents are, or what the goals of the guardians are, and the goals of the commission are, then I think that it can be very chaotic, and it can also just take away a holistic approach as far as like being able to reach the children where they're need, like being able to reach the children where the things are needed, being able to really understand what resources are necessary, and not implementing things that just worked in the past, but implementing things for parents that they are requesting, that they're in need of, and that their voices have been made heard in order to give them what they asked for.
Good evening. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
So I look at it as an umbrella. The CEO is definitely at the top of the decision making, or actually, let me take that back. So the CEO definitely divulges a lot of the decision making as far as being able to implement the things, put things in place, and say yes to what the commission is asking. So looking at the board, being able to understand what the needs of the school system are, what the needs of the CEO are, and even getting feedback as far as what's been implemented in the past. For lack of a better term, having the ability to have someone who is over the school system that has been here, has been made available, has also been willing and open to find out what's working for our students. And then when it comes to the board, being able to help push that mission forward, even when the CEO is not, may not have all the answers, having people on the board that are able to help with that, having people on the board who have different expertise, maybe in different parts of the field, still involved in education and community practices, who are able to assist her with those decision making, those decisions that need to be made. And yes.
Hi, Shauna. Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees as unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
So as a former BTU member, I understand there were a lot of things that we were asking for when it came to negotiating for teachers' rights and things like that. One of the biggest one being pay, and not just pay, but time, our time. One of the biggest negotiations that I know that we would talk about, especially within our school, was being able to have time to do certain things or giving back some time so that we could implement practices and go to professional developments and things like that that would make sense for teachers in order to implement them better in our classrooms. So understanding that between the two, having to negotiate for teachers and educators is probably at the forefront of everything, only because they're the ones who are in front of our students. They're the ones who are constantly communicating with parents and guardians. They're the ones who are implementing curriculum and things like that. And if teachers, educators, paraeducators are all effective and able to do the things they can do as far as what they're negotiating or what they're asking for, then it's a better school system, it's a better school day, and it all trickles down to the kids at the end of the day.
Good evening. What aspect of educational leadership would be most influential for your service as a board commissioner?
That's a good question. I think advocacy, as someone who does special educational advocacy on the side, as well as working with my nonprofit, being able to advocate for students, especially students who just don't understand or don't know what their rights are. I've had a lot of students with disabilities who barely even know what their IEP is or what the IEP stands for. So being able to advocate for students and their families who might not understand what their educational rights are, might not understand what is actually owed to them, what they're able to do with free and public education, that would be at the forefront of the leadership for me.
Thank you.
Hi there. Thanks so much for being here. One of the roles and responsibilities of the school board is to approve the budget and then have oversight over those expenditures throughout the course of a year and time. Can you share with us any experience you have managing a budget, what that looked like, what your role was, any information you have about the size of the budget and how you approached it, keeping in mind zero expectation, it was a budget the size of the school system or anything like that, just a general sense of a budget you've been involved with.
So right now I'm the program coordinator at Safe Alternative Foundation for Education, where I am in charge of our programming budget, ensuring that all of our students are having equitable access to programs that we run. So we run programs for students after school. They're in grades 6 through 8. We're also opening a workforce development center for ages 18 through 24 that involve construction and getting them certified in the construction field. So right now I'm responsible for the programming budget, making sure that all of the programs are paid for up front, making sure that I can negotiate as well programming budgets, because we are a nonprofit and we do like things to be free. But if they can't be free, being able to talk to partners, talk to those other founders of these organizations to see what we could do for them, to see what they could do for us, to make sure that one, the budget is actually in place, the budget makes sense, and whatever is a part of the budget is actually being paid for on time in a timely manner. Outside of that, I also am responsible for some of the grant writing and things like that. So it's really easy for me to look at budgets or to understand the importance of keeping to the budget, especially being under budget, so that just in case we need these funds for something else, or there's another program that our students want to be implemented, we can do that as well.
Hi, my question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
So charter schools are really interesting because I work with a couple of kids that are after school program who go to charter schools in Baltimore City Public Schools. And the autonomy that charter schools have is a little bit different than those that regular public schools. And I absolutely love to be able to see how they align their instruction, their after school programs and things like that with Common Core standards. And it's important because then it gives parents and guardians choices when it comes to public education, and maybe not going I won't say traditional route, but maybe not going the normal route of being a part of a traditional public school in that case, but putting your student in a school where there is the ability to do different things, or maybe the funding's a little different to where they have different programs or programs that are for specific things. I'm thinking of like Green Street or what's another one, or KIP, being able to be involved in schools that this charter is specific for. Yeah, I think that answered that. Yes. Sorry.
Good evening. So how would you advocate for young people or parents who believe the school board is not listening to them?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think one big thing that parents and guardians maybe don't comprehend or understand is that there are so many decisions and so many moving parts when it comes to a school system. And it's very difficult to, I think, from the outside looking in or being objective, being able to take everyone's decisions or everyone's opinions or everyone's asks and implementing them immediately. So being able to let them know that their voices are being heard, but there are time frames and things that have been asked for a certain amount of time that sometimes get sometimes get prioritized over other things. And that's only because we're looking at the betterment of the whole community and not just small specific communities, which I think can be a good thing and bad thing. But being able to let parents know that even though things might not look like they're being implemented, or maybe they've gone to parent meetings or community meetings and they've asked for things to be implemented and it just hasn't yet, that all of it's a process, and understanding that with any process, there's time involved. So being able to let them know that, hey, even though this is not something that you see in the forefront, just know that people are working behind the scenes. So maybe it's not so that your child might be able to be involved in this, or your child might have this ability, but your children's children, or maybe your children's siblings or cousins further down the line. And just understanding that you have to help parents understand what kind of processes things have to go through throughout the school system.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
I worked at a school that was 82% Hispanic and Latinx. And one thing that I found was really difficult was implementing wit and wisdom during that time when they came back from the pandemic, especially because a lot of them were English language learners. And when you already have a language barrier and a dense curriculum, it's very difficult to try to teach the curriculum with fidelity and also help them learn the language. So of course, in our school, we have an immersion approach, keeping them with other students who speak English, but also putting them through the ESOL program to get them where they need to be. But the hardest decision was how to teach the curriculum with fidelity, but also give these students what they needed, because I understood the language barrier and I understood that some of these students developmentally, it was just very difficult for them to stay on grade level and grasp things. So being able to find cross-curricular connections for them, being able to still teach the curriculum with fidelity, like my school leader asked us to, but also finding things that they might understood from their culture really, really helped. And it was tough. It took a lot of hard hours. It took a lot of research to be able to do. But in that school year, we moved about 30% of them from red to yellow with iReady diagnostics. So I think some of the work that we did helped a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back around to Cameron. Do you have another question?
Yep. What's been your most, in your career, what's been your most prominent role in leadership, and how will that assist you in being a school board commissioner?
So I honestly think it's the role that I'm in now, being program coordinator, and I'll say second, being case manager / IEP chair at my old school. Being able to be in those positions definitely helps me with a lot of the soft skills that I didn't know that I had or didn't understand that I needed, and kind of helped me to compartmentalize the things that were necessary when it came to a child's education. So getting it from the side of students with disabilities, and then also from the program coordination side while being at an educational nonprofit, I believe has definitely prepared me, because I've had to make decisions for not only students, but also parents as well, to help them understand their child's education. But when it also comes to program coordinating, having the autonomy to be able to build programs from kids' aptitude testing and their interest in things like that, and also reaching the parents and guardians as well, providing resources, I definitely think would help on their doing this position.
Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level.
I think total involvement. I think that there should be parents who are on committees that have direct influence on decision making. I believe that even students should be on these committees if they're well prepared enough to be able to be heard and understood. And I think a big part of it is just being able to see faces that are outside of the commissioners, outside of those that are at the district, and people who don't look the same, people who are from that part of the community, people who are in those zone areas for certain schools that we know that have been there for a long time, or that we know have certain disparities, certain things that are inequitable, and having them on involved in the conversations consistently, so that their voices are always heard, their faces are always seen, especially, and so that they're at the forefront of all of this, just so that we're not they're not getting lost in what's going on, and they're also feeling like being at the district level or being in this part of it or being this involved might really give them a sense of self, a sense of authority, and just a sense of pride, knowing that what they're doing, what they're asking for is being put at the forefront of conversations.
Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or on what topics you would hold the district CEO accountable. How should the board evaluate the CEO? What components of the CEO's job should be assessed?
I'm really, really, really passionate about curriculum and just what curriculums are being used for Black and Brown students in general. And keeping her accountable about what kind of information or what kind of curriculum is being divulged to students is one. Also, time management and just time in general. So teachers have complained for a long time about not having enough time to do certain things, mandates that come down from the district. That could be the CEO's decisions or could be other people from the district's decisions, but not being sure about that. But keeping her accountable of those two things, because one, if we don't have equitable access to a curriculum, then a lot of the things that we're implementing in city schools is for naught, and it's going to be very difficult to move our students in the way that we want to when it comes to literacy, when it comes to math, even getting them involved in extracurricular activities, and then also time, just because there are so many things that teachers could do if they had extra time or they were able to use their time differently, per se. Yeah, they were able to use their time differently. So whatever mandates are put in place as far as that goes, that those things stay where they are so that teachers can be as effective as they can be.
What role do you think systemic racism has played in the school system in Baltimore, and how should the district leaders address its legacy?
So redlining is huge in Baltimore. It's been talked about for generations and generations, and how redlining has really impacted the way that our school system has been able to reach certain students, how certain students are able to go to different schools as far as I'll just say that, yeah, how different students are able to go to different schools. And so it's very obvious that there have been certain disparities and discrepancies when it comes to racism, even down to how some of the schools look and how some of the technology and things are being implemented in schools are not updated versus those things that are being updated and used, and resources that are given to other schools. And I think it's always impacted our students. It's always even impacted our educators, because sometimes it seems like educators are being placed in certain places based on their demographics or based on the things that, or the way that they look or the way that they act. And then we have also the lack of resources in certain schools, depending on where that school is located. Schools that might be closer to downtown might have different resources because of, you know, where that's located. Schools that might be in Sandtown, Winchester, and Park Heights might have less resources or less options just because of where they are as well. So I think it plays a very, very big role in the school system. And I think it's something that we all have to be concerned about, just because we talk about equity so much, DEI, all of the things. And so making sure that everyone has access to the same resources across the board, whether it be Hampstead Hill, whether it be Katherine Johnson, you know, just making sure that all schools are doing the same thing so that all of our students have the ability to do what other students across the district are doing.
Thank you.
Okay, Roger, do you have another question?
Sorry, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mackenzie?
No.
Thank you. Charles?
I do. Looking at the school system overall, on a grading scale of A to F, what would you give the school system currently, and why would you give it that grade?
I would give it a C. I think I don't think we see a lot of the behind the scenes things that are going on when it comes to North Avenue district level. The way that buildings are being turned around, the way that schools are actually, there's a lot of schools, I believe, just talking to some of the friends that I still have who are in teaching, who are doing such good work with being able to move their students, looking at literacy goals and things like that from when I was sitting in on literacy meetings. I think there's so much good work being done around diagnostic testing and making sure that our students are actually growing in certain places, but because we have certain systems in place or certain outside of Baltimore City schools that don't really showcase all of the good things, it's very hard to see that. And sometimes it's very easy to get stuck in the same discourse over and over again and what City Schools has done and not looking at what City Schools is doing. So I would definitely say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Dr. Brooks?
I do, yes. What role do you think the school board plays in ensuring schools are safe and all district students, employees, and families feel welcomed and secure in our schools?
I think we 100%. I used to work at a school that did not have any doors. We had curtains for doors, and sometimes it would be a little fearsome, just, with the state of the world today and everything going on, about how safe we could keep our kids, how we could keep people out of our school, out of our school that maybe wanted to do harm or whatever the case is. And our principal was very, very willing to always fight for that, always ask who, I don't know exactly who she would ask, but always to make sure she would advocate for our safety first. And it got done. I did go visit a couple of weeks ago and I saw they got new doors on the outside, stronger security systems. So, being able to constantly advocate for something like that, and the district hearing how important that is and being able to make that change on a small scale, I'm sure that that's happening on a much larger scale as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Shauna, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for the panel?
Yes, so passion is very real, and being on a school commissioner board, I can tell that a lot of you are passionate about what you do. What's the hardest thing, or how difficult is it to keep your passion away from decision making when sometimes your passion just doesn't, what you're passionate about may not be the what you're passionate about may not be the objective per se. And that goes for anyone.
Shauna, what I've learned is that I am just a representative. I execute what BTU members ask me to execute. That is my constituency. I listen and I execute. I try to leave my own passions at the door. I get really excited if what members want actually align with my passions, but if they don't, my job is to execute what my constituency asks me to execute.
Thank you.
And Shauna, just for clarity, this is the community panel who makes the selection for the School Board of Commission, not the Board of Commissioners.
So I mean, in general, like I just meant the question in general. I'm sorry.
Got it.
Anyone else?
I think for me, I oversee all the vocational programs for the state of Maryland in their correctional system. And for us, we try to give a quality education so that as people reemerge into society, they actually have a way to go back in and get a job, getting their education, getting their college degrees. We understand how important that is. Very difficult though to say to try and leave your passion behind with that, because you have it every day. Every day you go in, there's a different story. Some are pulling your leg, we know that, but many are really trying. And I've said this before, and that's why I'm involved with trying to do things with the school system, is if we had done a better job 10, 20, 30 years ago, many of the young men that are in my program right now would not be in my program right now. So if we can start filling this gap ahead of time, I won't have that many to educate later on.
So my last question is, in 2024, post-pandemic, what is the most important thing that education can do for our students now? What is one of the we talk a lot about test scores, we talk a lot about literacy rates, we talk about things like that. But when it sometimes seems that we can't reach everything, what should be at the forefront of the conversation?
I would say our students' health and well-being, and I think we need to slow down.
We talk about this a lot. What is the purpose of a K-12 education? What are we trying to do with a K-12 education? And, you know, I do think in a post-pandemic world, I couldn't agree more, the health and well-being of students is hugely important. But at the end of a K-12 education, I feel like we want to be certain that kids have choices and options for themselves. And what I think their options should be sort of doesn't matter, but I want them to be prepared to pursue or do what it is they want to do and feel ready to do it, regardless of what that is.
So before I even weigh in, we actually have a student here, and I would love to hear from the student.
Yeah, I was gonna answer it, but it's a great question, but I don't know. Like, I can think of a lot of different things, but I agree with what was said before about just slowing down and like not slowing down like the rating, but just meeting students where they're at more often. I think we've gotten better at that, like post-pandemic.
Yeah, in working in community and hearing from young people, what I hear over and over again is making sure that their voices are heard, meeting them where they are, making sure that we are providing resources and services to educate all of them, their whole self. But most importantly, meeting them where they are, and just hearing from them.
And that was my last question. Thank you.
Shauna, thank you so much for joining us this evening. As just said, for your awareness for the next steps, the panel will be meeting again tomorrow to deliberate around all of the candidates, and the decision for who will go before the mayor will be made public on Monday. Next will be interviews with the mayor, and then he will make his final selections, and the swearing in of the new commissioners will happen by the end of the month.
Okay,
So
thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
So thank you. All right, everyone. This was a long night, but we appreciate your time. Please do check your emails. Jeanette sent out the calendar invite for tomorrow's meeting. As we stated, tomorrow's meeting will be an hour, so we really would like to start on time to make sure that we get everyone's voice and opinion. We will kind of do our discussion. Again, the discussion will be private, and then the kind of the yay or nay deciding who should go next will be the recorded session that will be made public. So please do review all your notes and just be prepared for tomorrow's meeting. Any final questions before we close?
Yes, Janelle, how many people does the mayor want?
So we have a group of 15. We would like to get that number to about 9 to send before him. Now, this will be a list that he's, of course, 2 seats are open currently. There will be a 3rd seat open, I believe, by the end of this year, correct? And so then from that same pool of the 9 that we send, he will choose his 3rd candidate from that pool when the time comes as well. But we are trying to get down to about 9.
Okay, and is the mayor also working to fill do we know if the 2 commissioners whose terms are ending at the end of June, are they doing another year, or do we need to fill their spots too? I'm asking because I would rather not have the community panel have to reconvene quickly again if we already know they're coming off the board. Have they given their responses as to what they're doing?
Tanisha, can you speak to that?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So, Commissioner, he comes off on June 30th, not the end of the year, but June 30th. So there will be 3 seats. Currently, there are 2 seats. The former Commissioner, Dr. Darrell Brooks, and Commissioner Atira Griffin. So those 3 seats will be open. There are 2 board members that are up for reappointment, and we'll be submitting letters to the mayor for reappointment. So it will only be 3 seats, Diamond Tech. President Brown for this session.
Okay.
Okay. Like I said, the group of 9 candidates that he gets, I think will be open for him to review again if he wants to interview them again at that time. I don't think we would, if we send a strong listing to him and he is generally agreeable to, the majority of them, then I don't think we would have to, at our point, meet again to do this. I think that he can go from that same pool of 9 and then make his selection for the other seats as they become available. Okay, any other questions? All right, I think with that, we can close for the night and we will see you all again tomorrow afternoon.
Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate you.
Have a good evening,
Thank
everyone.
you. Take care. Be safe, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.